If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Joseph Redfeather. I've been working as a park ranger at Carlsbad Caverns National Park for almost 8 years now. Most visitors don't realize that beneath the dry, hot New Mexico desert lies one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen, a world of darkness, silence, and amazing rock formations that took millions of years to form. That summer of 1972 was particularly hot above ground, but down in the caves, it was always the same, 56 degrees, day or night, summer or winter. I actually found comfort in that. While the world above changed constantly, the caves remained the same. At least, that's what I thought before everything happened. I'm Navajo, grew up not far from here. My grandfather used to tell me stories about these caves, about the spirits that lived underground. When I went to college to study geology, I tried to push those stories away. Science was my world now, but deep down, I never fully stopped believing. That's why I always wear the turquoise pendant my grandfather gave me. Protection from what dwells beneath, he called it. My colleagues joke about my little rituals before entering certain parts of the caverns, but they respect me enough not to say it to my face. That day started like any other. I was doing the final sweep before closing time, making sure no tourists had wandered off the path or gotten lost. With me was Timothy Marshall, a graduate student writing his thesis on cave formations. Smart kid, but too confident for his own good. City boy who thought he knew everything because he read it in a book. "How much longer, Joe?" Tim called out, his voice bouncing off the limestone walls. "I've got samples to catalogue before dinner." "Patience. Timmy," I replied, shining my lamp toward a corner I always checked twice. "The caves have been here for millions of years. They can wait another 15 minutes. That's when I first noticed something was off. The bats. They were flying past us, hundreds of them, hours before they normally left to hunt. They seemed panicked, not their usual organized exodus. "That's weird," Tim said, ducking as they swooped. Overhead. "Did we disturb them?" I shook my head. "We're nowhere near their roosting area." Then the silence hit me. If you've never been deep in a cave, you don't know what real silence is. But even caves have their sounds. Water dripping, distant. Echoes, the soft squeak of bats. Now there was nothing, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. "Do you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" Tim looked confused. "Exactly, nothing." The lights flickered then, just for a second. Our backup systems were solid, had never failed before. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. "Probably just a power surge," Tim said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We continued our sweep, moving toward the eastern passage, when I spotted something near the wall. A crack, no, more than that. A fissure running from floor to ceiling, about wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It hadn't been there yesterday. "The earthquake," I muttered. We'd had a small one 3 days ago, barely registered on the Richter scale. Didn't even close the park. But underground, even small shifts can change things. I approached the fissure carefully, shining my light into the darkness. The beam disappeared into nothingness, suggesting a large space beyond. "Tim, bring the radio. Let's call this in." He fumbled with the radio on his belt, turning dials. Nothing but static and strange, broken voices that didn't sound like our colleagues. "That's odd," he said, tapping the device. "It was working fine an hour ago." I moved closer to the fissure, and that's when I heard it. A faint scratching sound. Coming from inside, like nails on stone, or claws. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Tim nodded, his face pale in the lamplight. I should have walked away. Should have reported it and let a team handle it properly. But curiosity, the scientist in me, couldn't resist. I stepped closer, running my hand along the edge of the fissure. My fingers brushed against something etched into the rock. Symbols, not English letters. They seemed to have been revealed by moisture seeping through the newly exposed rock. The symbols matched stories my grandfather told, warnings about the pale dwellers who lived in the deepest parts of the earth. I'd always dismissed those tales as superstition. "We should mark this for investigation tomorrow," Tim said, already taking out his notebook. "This could be a major discovery, a previously unknown chamber." As Tim excitedly jotted notes, I felt my pendant grow strangely warm against my chest. Something wasn't right. 5 years ago, I'd led an expedition that ended with a collapse that killed 2 people. The scars on my hands reminded me daily of what happens when you rush in caves. "Let's head back," I said firmly. "We'll come back with proper equipment and a team." Tim looked disappointed but didn't argue. As we turned to leave, the lights flickered again. This time, they stayed off for 3 full seconds before returning. In those seconds of darkness, I heard the scratching sound grow louder. And something else, a soft, rhythmic clicking, like teeth chattering, or a language I couldn't understand. When the lights came back on, I noticed something on the ground that made my blood run cold. Footprints in the dust, not human tracks. They were too narrow, too long, and where there should have been 5 toes, these had 7 distinct marks. "Tim," I said quietly, "don't move." He followed my gaze to the footprints. His scientific mind immediately tried to rationalize. "Must be some kind of animal, maybe a new species of cave dwelling." His voice trailed off as we both realized the tracks led from the fissure and disappeared down the corridor we had just come through. Whatever made them had already passed us. "We're leaving. Now!" I grabbed his arm and we began walking quickly toward the main chamber. That's when my radio suddenly crackled to life. Through the static, I heard a voice, not one of our rangers, just 3 words in a whisper that sounded like stones grinding together. "Too late, tortoise." No one at the park called me that except the other rangers. Whatever was down here with us knew my nickname. As we rounded the corner toward the main chamber, we found our equipment, carefully taken apart, every piece laid out in precise, geometric patterns on the cavern floor, and I knew then that we weren't alone in Carlsbad Caverns anymore. Something had been waiting behind that rock wall. Something that my grandfather had warned me about my entire life. The Pale Dwellers had finally found a way through. Tim and I made it back to the visitor center, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched the whole way. My hands were shaking as I filled out the incident report. How do you explain footprints with 7 toes, or equipment arranged in patterns that shouldn't make sense to anyone? "We should go back tomorrow," Tim said, his eyes bright with excitement. The kid didn't understand danger when it was staring him in the face. "Think about it, Joe. This could be the discovery of the century." I shook my head. "I'm calling in specialists. Whatever's down there, it's not something 2 people should handle alone." But deep down, I knew specialists wouldn't help. What we found wasn't something science could easily explain. My grandfather's stories kept playing in my head. Tales of the Pale Dwellers who lived in the world beneath ours, creatures who were once human but changed after centuries underground. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those strange footprints and hearing that voice on the radio. Too late, tortoise, and only park staff knew that nickname. When morning came, I arrived early. My boss, Mike Sullivan, was already there looking worried. "Joe, did you leave equipment in Section E last night?" he asked. "No, we packed everything up." "Why?" "Because there's new stuff down there now. Specimen bags, collection tools, even a camera. All set up neat as can be. But get this, they're all from the 1950s. Old models we haven't used in decades." My stomach dropped. "Was there anything in the bags?" Mike looked uncomfortable. "Yeah, teeth, human teeth. About 30 of them arranged by size. Tim arrived while we were talking, and when he heard about the teeth, he actually got more excited. "This has to be a prank, right? Someone's messing with us." But no one was laughing. We gathered proper gear, extra lights, better radios, even a small handgun that Mike insisted I take. Against my better judgment, we headed back to the fissure. This time with 4 of us, Mike and Sarah Chen, our best. Gave rescue specialist joined Tim and me. As we approached the spot, I noticed something strange. Our compasses started spinning wildly, pointing in random directions. And every electronic device, flashlights, radios, the digital thermometer, drained completely within minutes, despite having fresh batteries. "This isn't normal," Sarah said, tapping her dead flashlight. "I've never seen anything like this." We switched to old-style lanterns and continued forward. The fissure was wider now, almost as if something had been clawing at the edges to make more room. "Look at this," Tim called out, kneeling by the entrance. He was pointing at a thick, oily substance coating the rocks. It felt slippery between my fingers, almost like petroleum jelly, but with a strange metallic smell. "We should take a sample," he said, reaching for a specimen bag. I stopped him. "Don't touch it more than necessary." Inside the fissure, the temperature dropped at least 20 degrees. Our breath came out in visible puffs. It shouldn't be this cold in any part of Carlsbad. The caves maintain a steady temperature year-round. As we moved deeper, I noticed strange markings on the walls, not the natural flow of limestone, but deliberate scratches forming patterns. Some looked recent, others were covered with years of mineral deposits, suggesting they were very old. "These look like cave paintings," Sarah whispered, shining her light on a section of wall. What I saw made my blood freeze. The images showed tall, thin figures leading humans underground. The humans in the images seemed to be changing as they went deeper, their eyes disappearing, their limbs growing longer. The paintings weren't new. They looked thousands of years old. "My grandfather used to tell stories," I said quietly, "about people who went too deep into the earth and never came back out, not because they got lost, but because they became something else." Mike gave me a strange look. "Let's just document this and get out." We continued through a narrow passage that opened into a large chamber we'd never mapped before. The ceiling soared at least 40 feet above us, covered in stalactites like stone teeth hanging down. That's when Sarah's light caught something disturbing. Fresh scratch marks on the ceiling, 16 feet up. Not from falling rocks or natural processes. These were deliberate, like something with claws had been crawling upside down across the surface. "How could anything reach that high?" Tim whispered. "Maybe it didn't have to reach," I said, remembering my grandfather's descriptions of the Pale Dwellers. "Maybe it was up there to begin with." We all instinctively looked up, our lights scanning. The ceiling. Nothing was there now, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. As we explored further, we discovered small piles of objects arranged in careful patterns throughout the chamber. A watch, coins, earrings, even old mining tools. Things that tourists or previous explorers must have dropped over the decades. But why collect them, and why arrange them this way? We were about to head back when we heard it, that same clicking sound I'd heard before, but louder now, coming from multiple directions at once, like a conversation in a language made of bone against stone. "What is that?" Mike asked, turning slowly, trying to locate the source. The clicks seemed to be coming from tiny holes in the walls all around us, too small for a person to fit through, but perfect for something that could change its shape. "We need to leave," I said firmly. "Now." As we turned to go, Tim suddenly froze, his head tilted as if listening to something. "Tim?" I touched his shoulder. He blinked rapidly. "Sorry, I thought I heard." "Never mind, let's go." That night, something strange happened. We were all staying in the park staff housing, planning our next move. Around 3 a.m., I woke to someone knocking at my door. It was Sarah, looking frightened. "It's Tim. Something's wrong." We found him walking down the hallway toward the cave entrance, still in his pajamas. His eyes were open but vacant, like he was sleepwalking. When we tried to stop him, he fought us with surprising strength. "I have to go back," he kept saying. They're calling me. It took both Mike and me to restrain him and get him back to bed. In the morning, Tim remembered nothing of his midnight walk, but there was something else I noticed as we wrestled him back to his room. A small cut on his arm that he'd gotten in the cave was now surrounded by pale, almost translucent skin. The veins around it looked blue and prominent, like they were too close to the surface, and his eyes, they seemed different somehow, less bright, as if something was slowly dimming the light behind them. "I feel fine," Tim insisted when I asked about it. "Better than fine, actually. I can hear everything now, even the water dripping through rock 2 floors below us. That's when I knew we were already too late. The Pale Dwellers hadn't just found a way through, they had found a way into us. The next morning, we had a meeting to decide what to do. Mike wanted to seal off the new section completely. Sarah thought we should bring in more experts. Tim, despite his strange behavior the night before, argued passionately that we needed to study whatever was down there. "We can't just ignore this discovery," he insisted. His voice sounded different today, raspier, with an odd clicking quality. When he pronounced certain words, I noticed other changes in him too. He winced at the bright lights in the conference room. His skin looked paler, and he kept tilting his head like he was listening to sounds none of us could hear. "Tim, maybe you should see a doctor," I suggested gently. "I'm fine," he snapped. "Better than fine. My senses, they're sharper now. I can hear water moving through pipes in the walls. I can smell what each of you had for breakfast." We all exchanged worried glances. This wasn't normal. While the others argued, I slipped away to call my cousin on the reservation. He connected me with an elder who knew my grandfather's stories better than anyone. I explained what we'd found, careful not to sound crazy. The elder was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Your grandfather warned about this. The earthquake opened a door that should have stayed closed." "What exactly are these things?" I asked. "They were human once, long ago. A tribe that went deep into the earth to escape enemies, but they found something down there, something old, that changed them. Generation after generation, they adapted to the darkness until they weren't human anymore. How do we stop them?" "Earth's blood," he said, "the blue stone. It burns their skin." My hand went to the turquoise pendant around my neck. Earth's blood. That's what my grandfather had called it. When I returned to the meeting, they had reached a decision. We would go back down, all 4 of us, with better equipment to document everything before deciding whether to seal the area. I didn't like it, but I couldn't let them go without me. I was the only one who understood what we might be facing. We entered the cave system after lunch. This time we brought powerful lanterns, backup batteries, cameras, and sampling equipment. I also brought something special, extra pieces of turquoise. "From my collection, 1 for each of us. Keep these with you," I said, handing them out. "Family tradition for protection in the caves." Sarah and Mike took theirs politely. Tim refused. "I don't need protection," he said, those once friendly eyes now cold and distant. The cave felt different this time. The air was heavier, damper. The familiar tunnels seemed changed somehow, as if the angles and shadows weren't quite where they should be. As we approached the fissure, I heard the clicking sounds again, faint at first, then growing louder. This time Tim cocked his head and smiled slightly, as if he understood what they meant. "They're curious about us," he whispered. "What are you talking about?" Mike asked sharply. "Who's curious?" Tim didn't answer. He just walked ahead, moving, with a new confidence through the darkness. The large chamber we'd discovered yesterday had changed. The piles of human objects had been rearranged into spiral patterns. New scratch marks covered the walls. And there was something else. Patches of glowing blue-green fungi growing in perfect geometric shapes. They cast an eerie light that made shadows dance even without our lanterns. "This is incredible," Sarah whispered, taking photos. "These fungi formations aren't random. They're too perfect. Almost like language." Tim walked directly to one of the glowing patches and stared at it intensely. "Yes," he murmured, "I see now." "See what?" I asked, growing more concerned by the minute. That's when we saw it, the first pale dweller. It happened so fast, I almost thought I imagined it. A flicker of movement at the edge of my light beam, a tall, thin figure that skittered away like an insect when illuminated. Just for a second I caught a glimpse of translucent skin with blue veins running beneath, long limbs with too many joints, and a face with sunken features where eyes should have been. Sarah gasped. Mike swore under his breath. Only Tim seemed unsurprised. "Did you see that?" Mike's voice shook as he swung his light wildly around the chamber. More movement caught my eye, not just one figure now, but several, darting between shadows just beyond our light's reach. They moved so quickly, climbing up walls and across ceilings with impossible agility. "We need to leave," I said firmly, gripping my turquoise pendant. "Now!" As if in response, a chorus of clicks echoed through the chamber, loud enough to make my ears hurt. Sarah dropped her camera, covering her ears. Mike's lantern flickered and died. Only Tim stood calmly, head tilted, listening. "They don't want us to leave," he said softly. "They've been alone for so long." "Tim," I said carefully, moving toward him, "these things aren't friendly. They're dangerous." He turned to me, and in the dim glow of the fungi, I could see his eyes had changed, the pupils expanding until they nearly swallowed the iris. "Not dangerous," he said, "just different. They've been watching us for years, learning from us. They want to show us something." A loud crash behind us made us all jump. Part of the tunnel we'd used to enter had collapsed, cutting off our escape route. "They did that!" Mike shouted, pointing his backup flashlight at the rubble. "They're trapping us!" More clicking sounds surrounded us, growing faster and more urgent. I noticed the pale dwellers were keeping their distance from me specifically, or rather, from the turquoise around my neck. Sarah noticed it too. "Joe, they're avoiding you." "Why?" Before I could answer, Tim suddenly walked toward the darkest part of the chamber where a narrow tunnel led deeper into the unknown. "Tim, stop!" I called after him. He turned back, and in the light of my lantern, I could see his transformation more clearly now. The cut on his arm had spread, the skin around it turning almost transparent. Blue veins webbed across his face. His movements had changed too, more fluid, almost boneless. "They have something to show us," he repeated. "Something beautiful, something ancient." Against my better judgment, we followed him. What choice did we have? Our original path was blocked. As we moved deeper, the tunnel widened into another chamber, this one even larger than the first. The walls here were covered with the glowing fungi, arranged in intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with light. The floor was smooth, worn down by countless feet over untold years, and there were more of them now, the pale dwellers. They kept to the shadows, but I could make out their forms more clearly. They varied in size, some small, almost childlike, gathering strange objects and bringing them to larger ones that seemed to direct their activities. "They're organized," Sarah whispered in amazement. "They have a society." Tim nodded. "They've been here for thousands of years, evolving, adapting." "How do you know that?" I demanded. He touched the wound on his arm. "I can hear them in my head. Since I cut myself on that rock formation yesterday, it was no accident. They wanted to connect with one of us." Mike had been unusually quiet. Now he spoke up, his voice tight with fear. "We need weapons. We need to fight our way out." "No!" Tim said sharply. "That's exactly what they're afraid of, why they've stayed hidden. They're peaceful and less threatened." As if to prove him wrong, one of the larger pale dwellers suddenly dropped from the ceiling, landing just feet away from us. It stood at least 7 feet tall, its body unnaturally thin but muscular. Its skin was so translucent I could see organs pulsing beneath. Where eyes should have been were just smooth indentations, but it turned its head precisely toward each of us, as if seeing without sight. Then it made those clicking sounds again. But this time they formed a pattern I almost recognized, like words just beyond understanding. To my horror, Tim clicked back. The creature tilted its head, then extended one long, seven-fingered hand toward Tim. Tim reached out to touch it. "Don't!" I shouted, but it was too late. Their fingers connected, and Tim gasped, his back arching. The veins in his arm turned dark blue, the color spreading visibly up toward his shoulder. When he turned back to us, his eyes had clouded over completely, milky white, with no pupils at all. "Now I understand," he said, his voice no longer sounding entirely human. "They want to help us evolve, to join them. The surface world is dying, but down here is safety." "Tim, these things are changing you," I said desperately. "This isn't evolution, it's infection," he smiled, showing teeth that seemed sharper than before. "You're wrong, Joe. They've shown me what's in the deepest chamber, what's been waiting all this time." "Waiting for what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Tim's cloudy eyes seemed to look right through us. "For the door to open, for the world above to weaken." He gestured around us. "These are just the scouts, the first wave. The true Pale Dwellers have been sleeping, thousands of them, and now they're waking up." As if on cue, a low rumble shook the chamber, dislodging dust from the ceiling. It wasn't an earthquake. It felt like something massive moving beneath us. The tall Pale Dweller made more clicking sounds, and suddenly all the smaller ones began to retreat, skittering up the walls and disappearing into tiny cracks too small for a human to follow. "They're leaving," Mike said hopefully. Tim shook his head, that inhuman smile still fixed on his face. "No, they're making room." The rumbling grew louder, and I knew then that we'd stumbled upon something far worse than I'd imagined. The creatures my grandfather warned about weren't just myths, they weren't just hiding, they were waiting for us to find them. The ground shook beneath our feet. Small rocks fell from the ceiling as dust filled the air. Whatever was coming, it was big. "We need to move," I said, grabbing Sarah's arm. "Now!" Mike didn't need convincing. He was already backing toward the tunnel we'd come through, but Tim stood his ground, that strange smile still on his face. "Tim, come on!" I shouted. He shook his head. "You don't understand the gift they're offering us, Joe." I didn't have time to argue. The rumbling was getting louder, and more of those tall, Pale Dwellers were emerging from cracks in the walls. "We have to leave him," Mike said, his voice breaking. "He's made his choice. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but Mike was right." We turned and ran back through the tunnel, the sounds of clicking and rumbling following us. When we reached the chamber with the collapsed tunnel, we discovered our problem. Our original way out was completely blocked. "There must be another way," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "Caves this size always have multiple passages." She was right. I shined my light around the chamber until I spotted a narrow opening on the far side. There! As we crossed the chamber, I noticed something strange. The piles of human objects, watches, coins, jewelry, were vibrating, sliding across the floor toward the center of the room, as if pulled by some invisible force. We squeezed through the narrow opening, finding ourselves in a sloping passage that seemed to lead upward. Hope flared in my chest. Up meant toward the surface, but after 20 minutes of climbing, the passage leveled out and then began to descend again, steeply. We were being forced deeper into the earth, not out of it. "My compass is useless," Mike said, tapping the wildly spinning needle. "I can't tell which direction we're heading." The passage opened into yet another chamber, this one different from the others. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and covered in those glowing fungi arranged in complex patterns. The floor sloped down toward a dark pool of water in the center. "Look at this," Sarah whispered, pointing her light at the wall. The symbols there were familiar, the same ones I'd seen near the fissure, but more of them, covering the entire surface. Ancient warnings. My grandfather said they worship something. I told them. Something they found deep underground that changed them. I think these are telling their story. Sarah studied the symbols. "These look like people entering caves. then changing, becoming something else. Mike's light caught something at the edge of the pool. Fresh footprints. Tim's boots heading toward the water. He came this way, Mike said. The pool looked bottomless, the water black and still as glass. But as we watched, ripples formed on the surface, though nothing had touched it. "Something's down there," Sarah whispered. Then we heard it. Tim's voice, echoing from somewhere beyond the pool. "Joe! Sarah! Mike! You need to see this. It's amazing!" He sounded excited, almost childlike. But there was that clicking quality to his voice that wasn't human. "Don't trust it," I warned. "That might not be Tim anymore." Mike shook his head. "We can't leave him. He's confused, infected or whatever, but he's still our friend." Before I could stop him, Mike started skirting around the edge of the pool toward a dark opening on the far side. Sarah and I had no choice but to follow. The passage beyond the pool descended in a spiral, like we were walking down an enormous drain. The walls here were wet and slick, making our progress slow and dangerous. One slip would send us sliding all the way down. As we descended, the air grew warmer, not cooler as you'd expect going deeper into the earth. And there was a smell, like rotten eggs mixed with something metallic. Sulfur and iron. We must be near some kind of geothermal activity, Sarah suggested. Hot springs or steam vents. The spiral passage finally ended in a vast, cathedral-like cavern that took my breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above us, covered in stalactites. Larger than trees. The floor was mostly level but broken up by steaming pools of water. And everywhere, covering every surface, was the glowing fungi, painting the whole cavern in eerie blue-green light. But what stopped us in our tracks wasn't the size of the place or its strange beauty. It was what hung from the ceiling. Thousands of cocoon-like shapes, each about the size of a human, suspended by threads that looked like spun glass. They gently swayed in air currents we couldn't feel. "What are those?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. As if in answer, one of the cocoons near the edge twitched. Then another and another. Whatever was inside them was moving. "They're waking up," came Tim's voice from behind us. We spun around. Tim stood there, but he barely looked human anymore. His skin had turned almost completely transparent, the network of veins clearly visible beneath. His eyes were totally white now, no iris or pupil, and his joints bent at unnatural angles, as if the bones inside had softened. "Tim," I said, my voice catching. He smiled, showing teeth that had grown sharp and needle-like. "Not just Tim anymore. Better than Tim. We are becoming what we were always meant to be." "We?" Mike asked. Tim gestured around the cavern. "All of us. Humanity. This is the next step in evolution, Joe. They've been waiting for thousands of years, adapting, changing, and now they're ready to share their gift with the world above." "This isn't a gift," I said firmly. "You're sick, Tim. These things have infected you with something, changed your mind somehow." He laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. Always the scientist, looking for logical explanations. But some things go beyond your science, Joe. Some things are older than human understanding. He pointed to the center of the cavern, where the floor dropped away into a perfectly circular pit. Steam rose from its depths, lit from below by a pulsing red glow. "The sleeper has been here since before humans walked the earth," Tim continued. "It called the first tribe down, changed them, taught them, and now it's waking up. The earthquake was its doing. It's growing stronger." More cocoons twitched overhead. Some were beginning to split open, revealing glimpses of pale, elongated limbs. "What is this sleeper?" Sarah asked, unable to hide her scientific curiosity even in this nightmare. Tim's face lit up. "Let me show you." He started walking toward the pit in the center. Without thinking, I grabbed his arm to stop him. My hand closed around his turquoise pendant, the one my grandfather had given me. Tim shrieked, a high, inhuman sound, and pulled away. Where my pendant had touched his skin, an angry red welt appeared, smoking slightly. Earth's blood. I whispered, remembering the elder's words. "It burns their skin." Tim's face contorted with rage. "You would deny us paradise because of your fear. The sleeper offers transformation, evolution beyond your understanding." All around the cavern, clicking sounds began to echo as more pale dwellers emerged from shadows and cracks. They were surrounding us, but keeping their distance from me, from my turquoise. That's when I had an idea. "Sarah, Mike," I said quietly, "take out your turquoise stones." They did, holding the small blue rocks in their palms. The nearest pale dwellers hissed and retreated. "It's our only advantage," I continued. "They can't touch it. We need to get back to the surface and warn everyone." "Warn them about what?" Mike asked, his voice shaking. I looked at Tim, at what used to be Tim, and the thousands of cocoons beginning to hatch above us. "About an invasion." Tim must have read my intention in my face because he let out another shriek, this one clearly a warning or alarm. The clicking sounds around us grew louder, more urgent. "Run!" I shouted, pushing Sarah and Mike toward the spiral passage. "Back to the pool!" As we turned to flee, I saw Tim's face one last time. There was something there just for a second, a flicker of the friend I knew, trapped behind those milky eyes. A look of fear, of desperate pleading. Then it was gone, replaced by inhuman rage, as he let out a sound no human throat could make. We ran for our lives, the sounds of clicking and screeching following us up the spiral passage. Behind us, I could hear the wet slap of too many limbs on stone as the pale dwellers pursued us, but they kept their distance from our turquoise, giving us just enough space to keep ahead of them. As we reached the chamber, with the black pool, I realized our problem. There was only one way out, and the pale dwellers would simply follow us, herd us wherever they wanted us to go, unless we could stop them. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my grandfather's pendant, the largest piece of turquoise I had. Without hesitation, I handed it to Sarah. "Both of you, keep going," I said. "Find a way to the surface. Warn everyone." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. I looked at the smooth, polished walls covered in warnings, written thousands of years ago. "I'm going to collapse the passage, bury these things before they can reach the surface." "That's suicide, Joe," Mike protested. "Maybe, but if thousands of those things get out..." I didn't finish the thought. I didn't have to. Reluctantly, they nodded. Sarah squeezed my hand, then they both continued around the pool toward the only exit. I turned back to face the spiral passage, hearing the pale dwellers getting closer. I wouldn't have much time. Carlsbad Caverns is thousands of years old, its formations delicate and perfectly balanced. In some places, a single support column holds up tons of rock. I'd studied these caves for years. I knew their weak points, and I knew exactly where to plant the small explosive charge every ranger carried for emergencies, for controlled demolitions to clear blocked passages. As the first of the pale dwellers emerged from the spiral passage, I was ready. I had positioned myself near a column that looked ancient and weathered, barely supporting a massive shelf of rock above. The creatures hesitated when they saw me alone, clicking to each other in their strange language. Then Tim emerged from their midst. "You can't stop this, Joe," he said, staying just beyond the range of my turquoise. "The sleeper has waited millions of years. A cave-in won't even slow them down." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But it'll buy time for Sarah and Mike to warn people." Tim's face twisted into something that wasn't a smile. "They won't make it to the surface. There are more of us in every tunnel, every passage. The pale dwellers have mapped these caves for centuries." My heart sank. Had I sent my friends into a trap? But I couldn't dwell on that now. The pale dwellers were spreading out, surrounding me, looking for a way past my turquoise protection. It was time. I set the charge at the base of the column, my hand surprisingly steady despite everything. I armed it, set the timer for 30 seconds. Just enough time to get clear. As I backed away, Tim's milky eyes widened. He understood what I was doing. "No!" he shrieked. the sound echoing off the chamber walls. The Pale Dwellers surged forward, their fear of the turquoise overcome by a greater fear. But they were too late. The timer hit 0. The explosion wasn't huge. It didn't need to be, just enough to shatter the ancient column. For a moment, nothing happened. Then came a deep, groaning sound from above as thousands of tons of rock shifted, and then the ceiling began to fall. The world became chaos. Rocks crashed down all around me as dust filled the air. The screams of the Pale Dwellers mixed with the thunder of falling stone. I dove behind a large boulder, covering my head with my arms as pebbles and dust rained down on me. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. When it finally stopped, I couldn't see anything through the thick dust. I couldn't breathe either. My lungs burned as I pulled my shirt over my nose and mouth. The explosion had worked even better than I'd hoped. The entire ceiling had come down, completely blocking the spiral passage. None of the Pale Dwellers could follow, but I was trapped on this side too. As the dust began to settle, I saw movement. My heart sank. Some of the creatures had survived, sheltered by the same rock formations that had protected me. And one of them was Tim. He lay half buried under smaller rocks, one arm pinned. Even through the settling dust, I could see he was hurt badly. Blue liquid, not red blood, seeped from cuts on his face and arms. Our eyes met across the chamber. For a moment, I saw confusion in those milky white eyes. Recognition. The Tim I knew was still in there somewhere, fighting to get out. Joe? His voice sounded almost normal, afraid, human. I hesitated. Was this a trick? The creatures were intelligent, cunning. This could be a trap to get me to come closer. "Joe, please!" Tim called again, his voice breaking. "It hurts. Help me." Against my better judgment, I moved toward him, gripping my turquoise tightly. The few surviving Pale Dwellers hissed and retreated into shadows, too weak or injured to attack. As I got closer to Tim, I could see the change in his eyes. The milky whiteness was fading, patches of his normal brown irises showing through. "What's happening to me?" he whispered, looking at his own transparent skin with horror. "I don't know," I admitted, kneeling beside him but keeping a safe distance. "But you've been fighting it. The real you is still in there." He nodded weakly. "They were in my head, showing me things, beautiful things." He shuddered. "And terrible things." "What did they want, Tim? What is this sleeper you talked about?" Tim's face twisted in pain, physical or mental, I couldn't tell. "It's ancient. Not from Earth, I think. It crashed here millions of years ago, burrowed deep. Been sleeping, healing. The tribes that found it, it changed them, made them its servants, eyes and ears on the surface. And now it's waking up, I guessed." Tim nodded. "The earthquake was just the beginning. It's stirring. When it fully wakes..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. "I need to get out of here," I said. "Warn people." "There's another way," Tim whispered. "Through the water, the pool. The Pale Dwellers use it. Leads to an underground river that comes out in the next valley. Follow it upstream." I wasn't sure I could trust him, but I didn't have much choice. All other exits were blocked by the cave-in. "What about you?" I asked. Tim smiled sadly. "Too late for me. I can feel it still in my head, trying to take control again. And I'm changing. My bones, my blood." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "Your pendant, the turquoise, it hurts them. It might free me." I understood what he was asking. The turquoise burned the Pale Dweller's skin. It might kill what was taking over Tim's body, but it might kill Tim too. "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, Joe." Tears of blue liquid ran down his face. "Don't let me become one of them. Don't let me help them reach the surface." It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I took my turquoise pendant and pressed it into his palm, closing his fingers around it. Tim's body arched in pain, smoke rising from where the stone touched his skin, but he didn't let go. His eyes locked with mine, and I saw gratitude there. "Run," he whispered through clenched teeth. "They're coming, all of them, thousands." The sleeper won't stay buried forever. I squeezed his shoulder one last time, then turned and ran toward the black pool. Behind me, I heard Tim cry out. Not in pain this time, but like a battle cry. Through tears, I glanced back and saw him standing, the turquoise glowing in his hand, facing down the remaining Pale Dwellers who were emerging from hiding. He was buying me time. I reached the pool and didn't hesitate. I dove in, the icy water shocking my system. It was like swimming in ink. I couldn't see anything, just had to trust Tim's directions and swim down, looking for the underwater passage. My lungs were burning when my hand finally found an opening in the rock wall. I pulled myself through, fighting panic as the passage narrowed. Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath any longer, I surfaced in a small air pocket. I gasped, filling my lungs. The space was tiny, just enough room for my head. But I could feel a current pulling me forward, an underground river just like Tim said. I took another deep breath and dove again, letting the current carry me. It was terrifying, being pulled along in complete darkness, not knowing if I'd find another air pocket before my lungs gave out. Twice more, I found small spaces to breathe. The third time I surfaced, I saw light. Faint daylight filtering down through crystal clear water. With the last of my strength, I swam upward and broke the surface of a small pond I'd never seen before. Somewhere outside the park boundaries, in the next valley, just as Tim had said, I dragged myself onto the shore, coughing and gasping. For a long time I just lay there, too exhausted to move. When I finally sat up, I looked back at the innocent-looking pond. Nothing about it suggested the horrors that lay beneath. No one would ever guess. I wondered about Mike and Sarah. Had they made it out? Or had they run into more Pale Dwellers in the tunnels? I had to believe they were alive, had to hope they'd found their way to the surface. It took me hours to hike back to the park. By the time I reached the ranger station, it was dark. Everyone was frantic, searching for us. We'd been missing for over 24 hours. I told them about the cave-in, about getting separated from Mike and Sarah. I described how I'd found an underwater passage out, but I didn't tell them the rest. Who would believe me? Search parties found Mike and Sarah the next morning. They'd gotten lost in the tunnels, but managed to hide from something they couldn't clearly describe. They were dehydrated and exhausted, but alive. Later, when I visited them in the hospital, I could tell by their eyes that they weren't sharing everything either. They'd seen things too impossible to explain. 3 days later, I submitted my official report. Cave-in caused by structural instability after the earthquake. Tragic loss of Timothy Marshall. Recommendation to permanently seal the eastern section of the caves. To my relief, the Park Service agreed. They brought in experts who filled the fissure and surrounding tunnels with concrete. For public safety, the official statement said. I quit my job a week later. Couldn't bear to go back underground. Moved to Arizona, took a teaching position at a small college, tried to forget. For 3 months, I almost convinced myself it had all been some kind of shared hallucination. Stress and cave gases playing. Tricks on our minds. Then the reports started coming in. Hikers in remote areas of New Mexico describing strange, pale figures, watching them from cave entrances. A spelunking team in Colorado going missing, only to be found wandering the desert with no memory of where they'd been. Their skin unusually pale, sensitive to sunlight. A small town in Utah where people began hearing clicking sounds in the walls of their homes, where children started sleepwalking toward the mountains. I keep my grandfather's teachings close now. I wear turquoise always. I've sent anonymous packages of it to Mike and Sarah too, with notes simply saying, protection. Because I know the truth. The cave-in didn't stop them. Tim was right. The sleeper won't stay buried forever. The Pale Dwellers have other ways to reach the surface. Maybe they've been doing it for centuries, taking just a few people at a time, staying hidden, preparing. Sometimes at night I think I hear clicking sounds in my walls. I tell myself it's just the house settling. But I know better. They found me once. They can find me again. And sometimes I dream of Tim. Not the Tim who was changing into one of them, but my friend, standing at the entrance to a cave, trying to warn me. In the dreams, he always says the same thing. They're coming, Joe. And this time, they're not hiding. I wake up in cold sweat, wondering how many more earthquakes it will take. How many more fissures need to open before what sleeps beneath fully awakens? All I can do is warn others. Be ready, because we've always looked to the stars for alien life, never thinking that the real threat was beneath our feet all along. In the hollow earth, where the pale dwellers wait. My name is William Hawkins, and I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 15 years now. Some people say the mountains get boring after a while. They're wrong. Every day brings something new. A different light on the peaks, a family of deer crossing your path, or clouds that paint strange shadows on the valleys below. This morning started like most others during my 6-day patrols. I woke up before sunrise, made my coffee on the small portable stove, and packed up my tent. The air was colder than usual for May, the kind of cold that bites at your nose and makes your eyes water. I could see my breath hanging in the air longer than normal. I adjusted my backpack straps and checked my supplies one more time. Water, emergency rations, first aid kit, flares, satellite phone, and the old Zippo lighter that used to belong to my dad. I don't smoke anymore, haven't for years, but that lighter has gotten me through some tough spots. Sometimes just knowing you can make fire is enough to keep you warm. Another beautiful day in paradise, I said to myself, something I've done every morning on patrol since I started this job. The mountains don't answer back, but sometimes I think they're listening. The trail ahead wound through alpine meadows, where the grass swayed like ocean waves. In the distance, I could see a family of mountain goats, their white coats blending with patches of snow that hadn't melted yet. I took a moment to watch them through my binoculars. They seemed peaceful, unbothered by the unusual cold. I checked my watch. I was scheduled to meet Dr. Laurel Matthews at her research station by noon. She's a glaciologist studying why the ice is melting faster than anyone expected. Last night, she radioed in about a significant discovery. Knowing Laurel, that could mean almost anything. She gets excited about ice formations most people wouldn't look at twice. As I walked, I noticed something odd about the frost on the rocks beside the trail. Instead of random patches, it formed perfect geometric patterns, tiny squares and triangles that looked almost man-made. I've seen frost in all kinds of shapes over the years, but nothing like this. I snapped a few photos with my phone to show Laurel later. The path climbed higher, and I felt the familiar ache in my right leg. The steel rod holding my femur together reminds me of its presence on cold days. 15 years ago, I was training for the Olympics as a biathlete. Skiing and shooting were my life. Then came the accident. Doctors said I might not walk normally again, but they underestimated how stubborn I can be. Still, my days of competitive sports were over. The Park Service gave me a second chance. Out here, having a gimpy leg doesn't matter much as long as you know how to survive. I reached for my radio to check in with headquarters. Ranger Hawkins here, at Checkpoint 3, heading toward the Matthews Research Station. Over. Instead of the usual quick reply, I heard a strange echo, like my voice was bouncing off something that shouldn't be there. I tried again with the same result. Finally, through static, I heard, "Copy that, Hawkins. Weather system moving in faster than predicted. Consider postponing your visit to the station. Over." I looked up at the sky. Sure enough, dark clouds were gathering directly over the path ahead, forming faster than any natural weather pattern I'd ever seen. They swirled in an almost circular pattern, centered exactly over where I knew the research station to be. "Negative. On postponing," I replied. Matthews reported a significant finding yesterday. Going to check it out and then head back if weather deteriorates. Over. The radio crackled with static before I heard, "Your call, Hawkins. Just don't make me send a rescue team after you. Not again. Over." That stung a bit. 2 hikers died on my watch during my first year as a ranger. I was still learning the park's moods then, how quickly things can turn deadly at this altitude. Since that day, I've become obsessive about safety protocols. Some say too obsessive. My ex-wife Annie would certainly agree. It's part of why she left, taking our son Tyler with her. Now I only see him on awkward weekend visits where neither of us knows quite what to say. As I hiked further, the temperature dropped noticeably. My thermometer showed a 20-degree drop in just 30 minutes, impossible for natural conditions. I zipped my jacket up to my chin and pulled on gloves. That's when I noticed the animal tracks. Deer prints in the soft earth suddenly stopped, mid-stride, as if the animal had simply vanished into thin air. I knelt down to examine them more closely. There was no sign of a struggle, no other prints nearby from a predator. They just ended. A quarter-mile later, I came across a small glacial lake that should have been partially thawed by this time of year. Instead, it was frozen solid. I carefully stepped onto the ice, which held my weight without even a creak. Kneeling down, I wiped away some snow to look through the clear surface. Deep below, I could make out dark shapes that seemed almost human-sized, but distorted by layers of ice. My instincts were screaming at me to turn back, but I've never abandoned a mission halfway. Besides, Laurel might need help if the weather was turning this badly. The research station came into view as I rounded a bend in the trail. A small, modern building with solar panels and weather monitoring equipment on the roof. No smoke came from the chimney, which was unusual in this cold. No one moved around outside, but I could see lights on through the windows. "Dr. Matthews," I called out as I approached. No answer. The wind picked up suddenly, cutting through my layers like they were made of paper. My breath crystallized instantly, in front of my face, hanging in the air in strange patterns that reminded me of the frost formations I'd seen earlier. As I reached for the door handle of the research station, I noticed something that made my blood run cold despite my years of wilderness experience. My own footprints in the snow behind me were filling with frost, the ice forming so rapidly I could actually see it growing. The cold was following me. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, not knowing that I was walking into the most terrifying experience of my life. One that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the natural world and my place in it. The warm air inside the station hit my face like a blessing, but the silence was immediate and wrong. Research stations are never completely quiet. There's always the hum of computers, the whir of heating systems, the small sounds of people working. But here, there was just the soft bubbling of a coffee maker. 2 mugs sat on the table, still steaming. Laptops lay open, screensavers dancing across their screens. Equipment beeped and whirred, recording data with no one to monitor it. It looked as if everyone had simply stood up and walked out mid-morning. "Hello? Laurel? Anyone here?" My voice echoed through the small space. On a whiteboard, complex equations and diagrams were scrawled in different colors of marker. I'm no scientist, but even I could tell something wasn't right about the numbers. Temperature recordings showed impossible fluctuations, dropping to levels that would freeze a person solid in seconds, then rising to normal within minutes. I found Laurel's journal open on her desk, her normally neat handwriting growing increasingly. Messy in the most recent entries. Day 47. The ice core samples show anomalous patterns dating back approximately 10,000 years. Something happened here, a rapid freeze unlike anything in the geological record. Day 48. The receding glacier has revealed a chamber. Initial radar scans suggest it's not natural. I've requested permission to explore further. Day 50. There's something in there. I can see it when the light hits the ice wall just right. It moves. The others think I'm imagining things. The final entry sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Day 51. It's watching us. Through the ice. It's hungry. God help us, it's getting out. Outside the windows, the unnatural fog I'd noticed earlier had thickened, completely surrounding the research station. It moved against the wind, maintaining a perfect half-mile perimeter like a wall. Tried the radio again. Base, this is Hawkins. I've reached the Matthews station. No personnel present but signs of recent occupation. Requesting immediate backup and possible search and rescue operation. Over. Instead of headquarters, I heard fragments of conversations I'd had days ago, played backward, mixed with a sound like ice cracking that formed patterns disturbingly similar to human speech. Something was very wrong here, and deep in my gut, I knew I wasn't alone. I moved carefully through the empty research station, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Everything looked normal, except for the fact that no people were here. Breakfast dishes sat in the sink. A jacket hung on the back of a chair. A space heater hummed in the corner. Laurel, I called again, listening for any sound of human movement. Nothing. I checked the small bedrooms one by one. Beds were made in some, messy in others. Personal items, books, phones, photos of families, all left behind. No signs of struggle or panic. It was as if everyone had just stepped outside for a minute and would be right back. But they wouldn't. Be back? Somehow I knew that. I returned to the main research room and looked more closely at the equipment. Digital thermometers showed temperatures dropping and rising by 50 degrees in seconds. A radiation counter clicked steadily, its needle jumping erratically, even though there shouldn't be any unusual radiation here. A seismograph recorded tiny earthquakes that I couldn't feel, tremors with no clear source or pattern. None of it made any sense. On a desk near the window, I found a camera. I turned it on and scrolled through the most recent photos. They showed the glacier that loomed about a quarter-mile from the station, a massive wall of ancient ice slowly retreating due to climate change. But something about the pictures wasn't right. In each one, there seemed to be a dark shape within the ice, visible only when sunlight hit at certain angles. And with each photo, the shape appeared closer to the surface. The last photo made me nearly drop the camera. It showed what looked like a human hand pressed against the ice from the inside, fingers splayed as if trying to push through. This can't be real, I muttered to myself, setting the camera down with shaking hands. Outside, the strange fog continued to circle the station. The temperature inside had begun to drop, despite the heaters running at full blast. I could see my breath again. My ranger training kicked in. Whatever was happening, I needed to gather information and evidence, then get back to base to report. People's lives could be at stake. I found an empty notebook and began documenting everything I saw, writing down times, temperatures, and observations. It helped calm my racing heart. Problems can be solved when you break them down, analyze them, find their patterns. That's what I've always believed. In the lab area, test tubes and petri dishes were arranged neatly on shelves. I'm no scientist, but even I could tell something was off about the samples. What looked like ordinary ice cubes contained perfectly preserved insects, down to the tiny hairs on their legs. But when I looked closer, I realized with horror that the insects' insides were frozen too, like they'd been instantly flash frozen from the inside out. That's not possible with normal freezing. A door at the back of the lab led to a small storage room. When I opened it, cold air rushed out like a living thing, knocking me back a step. Inside, ice sculptures lined metal shelves, incredibly detailed. Figures of small animals like squirrels, rabbits, and birds. They looked so realistic. I reached out to touch a frozen robin, and its wing broke off in my hand. Inside wasn't ice at all, but actual flesh, perfectly preserved. These weren't sculptures, they were real animals, somehow instantly frozen solid. My hands trembled as I closed the door. Whatever had happened here went beyond anything in my 15 years of experience. I needed to contact headquarters again. The satellite phone was my best bet, since the radio wasn't working right. I found it on a charging dock, but when I tried to turn it on, the screen showed only swirling patterns of frost that looked strangely like faces. The building creaked around me as the temperature continued to drop. Frost patterns began forming on the insides of the windows. Not random patterns, but geometric shapes that seemed to be trying to form words or symbols. I walked to the largest window to look outside. What I saw made no sense. From this window I could see a mountain peak that shouldn't be visible from this angle. I moved to another window, and the view showed a deep valley that didn't exist on any park map I knew. Each window seemed to look out on a completely different landscape, as if the research station existed in multiple places at once. Get a grip, Hawkins, I told myself firmly. There's a logical explanation for all of this. I've never been one for ghost stories or supernatural. Nonsense. Nature is strange enough without inventing monsters. Everything has a scientific explanation, even if we don't understand it yet. But as I watched frost crawl across computer screens, forming images of people I recognized, research team members frozen in expressions of terror, that rational part of my brain began to falter. The screens showed timestamps from hours in the future. My attention was drawn to a particular screen showing camera footage from outside the station. In the background, partially obscured by swirling snow, a tall, thin shape moved with unnatural smoothness. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It seemed almost made of ice itself. The temperature inside the station had now dropped well below freezing, despite the heaters. My fingers were getting stiff, and each breath came out as a white cloud. But oddly, I felt an unnatural warmth coming from the direction of the glacier outside, like a beacon drawing me forward. I found myself moving toward the door before I even realized what I was doing. Some part of me knew I should stay inside, try again to call for help, wait for backup, but that pull was too strong to resist. I put on my gloves, zipped my jacket up tight, and grabbed a flashlight and my pack. Whatever was out there, I needed to face it. Maybe Laurel and her team were out there somewhere, needing help. As I stepped outside, the air hit my lungs like liquid nitrogen. It had to be 40 below zero at least, deadly cold. No human could survive long in this. But that strange warmth still called from the glacier, growing stronger. The path to the glacier was clear of snow, as if something had melted a perfect walkway through the drifts. On either side, more of those ice sculptures lined the way, small animals frozen in mid-motion. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I passed. Something caught my eye, a notebook half buried in snow. I picked it up and recognized Laurel's handwriting again. The last entry read, "It's coming out tonight. We're going to the glacier to witness it. Reeves thinks we should run, but it's too important. Science needs to document this, whatever it is. If you find this, stay away from the ice. It hungers. I should have turned back then." Everything in my ranger training, all my survival instincts, told me to run the other way, to get help. But I kept thinking about Laurel and her team. If they were out there, they'd be freezing to death. And if I'm being honest, that pull from the glacier was getting too strong to fight. It called to something deep inside me, something that recognized its voice on a level I can't explain. As I approached the massive wall of ice, I noticed something that didn't belong. A perfect archway, melted into the glacier face, like an entrance to a cave. No natural process could form something so precise. Standing before that dark opening, I felt two competing emotions, overwhelming fear telling me to run, and an almost hypnotic attraction pulling me forward. I clicked on my flashlight, took a deep breath of air so cold it burned my lungs, and stepped into the darkness of the glacier. The ice tunnel was smoother than any cave had a right to be, as if polished by careful hands. My flashlight beam reflected off walls of perfect blue-white, creating dancing patterns of light. The temperature here wasn't as deadly cold as outside, but something else was wrong: the silence. Glaciers are never completely quiet. They're always shifting, cracking, moving. But here, no sound existed except my breathing and footsteps. The tunnel sloped gently downward, leading deeper into the heart of the glacier. After about 50 yards, it opened into a larger chamber that made me stop in my tracks. The walls were lined with perfect ice coffins, each containing a human figure. Some wore clothing from centuries past: animal skins, old-fashioned wool coats, vintage park ranger uniforms. Others were modern, including people in researcher jumpsuits with the same logo as Laurel's team. And they all looked perfectly preserved, their faces contorted in expressions of pure terror. Many had their hands up as if trying to fight off something. Their eyes were open, somehow not clouded by ice crystals as they should be. Worst of all was the sense that they weren't completely dead, that somehow, on some level, they remained aware behind those frozen eyes. In the center of this horrific gallery stood Laurel Matthews, not in ice, but standing perfectly still, her back to me. Relief flooded through me. "Laurel! Thank God! We need to get out of here now." I rushed toward her. She didn't respond or move. When I reached her and gently turned her by the shoulder, I nearly screamed. Half of her face and body was normal. The other half was slowly turning to ice, the transformation creeping across her features like a disease. One eye looked at me with desperate recognition. The other was a perfect blue-white crystal. "Run," she whispered through lips that barely moved. "It's coming." And then I felt it. Something ancient and cold and hungry entering the chamber behind me. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go, just more ice tunnels leading deeper into the glacier, and I couldn't leave Laurel. "What is it?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "What's happening to you?" Her partly. Frozen lips barely moved. Ancient hunger, awakened by the melt. Each word seemed to cost her tremendous effort. We thought studying, but it was studying us. Slowly, I turned to face whatever had entered the chamber. At first, I saw nothing but blue shadows on ice. Then it moved, and I understood why. The creature blended perfectly with the glacier itself. It stood roughly 7 feet tall, humanoid, in shape, but wrong in every detail. Its body seemed made of living ice, semi-transparent, so I could see darker shapes moving inside it, like organs made of ancient glacier water. Its face was the worst part. Features that were almost human, but stretched and distorted, with eyes like frozen pools that had never seen sunlight. When it tilted its head to study me, I heard ice cracking. This was the Ice Walker. I knew its name without being told, as if it had placed the knowledge directly in my mind. "Don't look directly at it," Laurel managed to say. The ice had now covered her neck and was creeping toward her other cheek. "It gets in through your eyes." I averted my gaze, looking at the creature's feet instead. They didn't quite touch the ground, but hovered an inch above it, frost patterns forming wherever it passed. The chamber grew even colder. My breath came, out as thick white clouds that hung in the air too long, forming shapes that looked almost like words before dissipating. The Ice Walker raised one long, crystalline arm, pointing at me. The ice around us groaned and shifted. From the walls, floor, and ceiling, ice began forming shapes like fingers, reaching toward me. I backed away until I hit the wall. My hand touched my pocket where I kept my father's Zippo lighter. The creature took a gliding step forward, where direct sunlight from a crack in the ceiling hit it. Its form seemed to waver and retreat, the ice becoming more liquid before it shifted away from the beam. It feared light, or heat, maybe both. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the Zippo and flicked it open. The small flame seemed pathetically weak in this frozen hell, but the reaction was immediate. The ice walker recoiled, making a sound like icicles shattering against rock. "Fire," I said, more to myself than to the creature. "You don't like fire." I held the lighter out in front of me like a shield and took a careful step toward Laurel. The ice walker retreated slightly, but continued watching me with those ancient, hungry eyes. "Can you move?" I asked Laurel, not taking my eyes off the creature. "Not much," she replied. The ice had now covered most of her left side. "It's preserving me, keeping me aware. I'm going to get you out of here," I promised, though I had no idea how. The ice walker made that strange ice-cracking sound again, and suddenly the chamber was filled with swirling snow that hadn't been there before. The visibility dropped to almost nothing in seconds. I lost sight of the creature, but could sense it circling, using the blizzard as cover. I kept the lighter flame going with one hand and grabbed Laurel's still human arm with the other. "We need to move. Now," she tried to walk, but her legs were too frozen. I ended up half carrying, half dragging her toward what I hoped was the tunnel entrance. The snow was so thick I could barely see 3 feet ahead. The temperature dropped even further. The cold bit into my exposed skin like tiny knives. Even through my gloves, my fingers were going numb. The lighter flame wavered. Something cold brushed against my back. Not ice, but a sensation like having my body heat sucked away. I spun around and saw the ice walker right behind us, its frozen hand reaching for my neck. I thrust the lighter at it, and it retreated with another shattering sound. "The others," Laurel gasped, nodding toward the ice coffins lining the walls. "Some might still be alive in there, like me." I looked at the dozens of perfectly preserved bodies. Could some of them really be conscious? Trapped for who knows? How long? The thought made me sick. "I can't help them all," I said, the truth of it breaking my heart. "I can barely help you." We reached the tunnel entrance, but found it blocked by a wall of ice that hadn't been there before. The ice walker was cutting off our escape. "It's herding us," Laurel whispered. "Deeper in." The only open path now led further into the glacier. Away from safety, away from the sun. But we had no choice. Half carrying Laurel, I moved down the new tunnel, holding the lighter out before us. As we went deeper, the ice walls changed. They became covered with symbols, not carved or painted, but formed in the ice itself, like the frost patterns I'd seen earlier, but more complex. They seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. "What are these?" I asked. "It's language," Laurel replied. The ice had now reached her chin, creeping toward her mouth. "The creature communicates through. Ice structures, don't stare at them, causes hallucinations." I kept my eyes on the path ahead, but it was hard not to glance at the mesmerizing patterns. When I did, they seemed to pulse with meaning just beyond my understanding, and I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting beneath me. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, but somehow more terrible. Here, ice formations shaped like people stood in poses of everyday life, eating, working, reading. But these weren't like the coffins. These were sculptures made of pure ice, yet so detailed I could see fingerprints and eyelashes. "It's studying us," Laurel said. Her voice was getting weaker. "Learning how to be like us." In the center of the chamber stood an ice table covered with objects frozen in perfect crystal. Watches, compasses, phones, cameras. Tools and technology from different eras, preserved like museum pieces. Behind the table, the wall of the glacier was clear as glass, and embedded within it I could see something dark and massive, the shadowy shape I'd glimpsed in the photos. Back at the research station, it was humanoid but ancient, preserved in the deepest layer of the glacier. As I watched, its eyes opened, not blue like the ice walkers, but black as night, the original. The source, the ice walker glided into the chamber behind us, cutting off any retreat. It raised both arms, and to my horror, the ice sculptures began to move, not smoothly, but in jerky, puppet-like motions, their limbs cracking and reforming. As they turned toward us, my lighter flame was getting smaller as the fuel ran low. I needed something more. "Laurel, do you have anything flammable? Alcohol, chemicals, anything?" Her eyes, one normal, one crystallized, widened slightly. "Lab, sample case, my pocket." With one hand still holding the wavering lighter, I reached into her coat pocket and found a small metal case. Inside were vials of clear liquid. "Ethanol," she managed to say, "for preserving samples. It would have to do." I pulled out a vial and unscrewed the cap with my teeth, then splashed some on the floor between us and the advancing ice sculptures. When I touched the lighter to it, blue flames leapt up, creating a momentary barrier. The ice walker shrieked. A sound like breaking glass amplified 1,000 times. The moving sculptures froze in place. In that moment of confusion, I noticed a narrow crevice in the wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but leading upward toward what might be a way out. "Laurel," I said urgently, "I'm going to have to carry you. The ice has spread too far for you to move." "Leave me," she whispered. "Too heavy. Too late for me." "No one gets left behind," I insisted. "It's the Ranger Code, and I've lived by it since those first 2 hikers died under my watch. Never again." I hoisted Laurel over my shoulder in a fireman's carry. The ice covering half her body was shockingly cold against my neck, but I ignored the pain. The fire on the floor was already dying down as the ethanol burned away. The ice walker and its sculptures would be after us in seconds. With the last of the ethanol, I made a line of fire leading away from the crevice. A distraction. Then I squeezed into the narrow opening with Laurel, scraping my shoulders raw against the ice walls. The passage angled upward at about 45 degrees. Climbing would have been hard enough alone, but with Laurel's weight it was nearly impossible. My legs shook with effort. My bad knee, with its steel rod, threatened to give out entirely. Behind us, I heard the ice walker enter the crevice. The walls around us groaned as the creature manipulated the ice, widening the passage for itself. It was coming, and faster than we could climb. "Hawkins." Laurel's voice was faint now, the ice having reached her jaw. "Listen to me. The entity, it's not just a monster. It was human once." I grunted with effort as I pulled us up another few feet. "What do you mean?" "Ancient shaman, tribal healer from thousands of years ago, found in ice cores. Evidence of ritual transformation. Gave up humanity to become winter spirit during Ice Age to survive. The information didn't help us escape, but somehow knowing what we faced made it slightly less terrifying. Monsters from nowhere are scarier than ones with origins you can understand. So what does it want?" I gasped, my lungs burning from exertion and cold. "To remake the world in ice. It's been trapped for millennia. Climate change freed it. Needs to gather enough energy. Create new Ice Age." The words came between shallow breaths as the ice crept closer to her mouth. "Each person it freezes adds to its power." The passage suddenly opened up into a small cave with a crack in the ceiling that let in daylight. Hope surged through me until I looked more carefully. The opening was at least 20 feet up, and the walls were sheer ice. No way to climb it, especially not carrying Laurel. And we were trapped. The ice walker was coming up the passage behind us, and there was nowhere else to go. Laurel must have realized it too. "Put me down," she said firmly. I lowered her carefully against the wall. The ice had now covered most of her body, except for part of her face and one arm. She looked at me with her remaining human eye. "I have a plan," she said, "but you won't like it." Before I could respond, a cold wind filled the cave, and the ice walker emerged from the passage. It stood there, watching us with those ancient eyes. Behind it, I could see more ice sculptures climbing up. No, not sculptures. As they came into the light, I realized with horror that they were the frozen bodies of the research team, animated, like puppets by the creature's will. I recognized their faces from the photos in the station. Dr. Chen, the geologist, Roberts, the equipment specialist, Torvik, the grad student, all moving with jerky, broken motions, their eyes frozen open in eternal terror. The Ice Walker raised a crystalline hand, and ice began forming around my boots, anchoring me to the floor. That's when Laurel did something I'll never forget as long as I live. "I'm already half frozen," she said, her voice stronger than it had been since I found her. "My body temperature is dropping, but I'm still alive enough to register as heat to it." She looked at me with fierce determination. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back." "Laurel, no. It hunts by sensing body heat," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "I'm going to confuse it, give you a chance." The ice was up to my knees now. The Ice Walker glided closer, its frozen minions spreading out around the edges of the cave. With what must have been excruciating effort, Laurel broke her partly frozen body away from the wall. Ice cracked and fell from her in chunks. She stumbled forward, directly toward the Ice Walker. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "My body's already changing," she gasped. "Becoming like it. I can feel its thoughts, its hunger." Her voice had taken on a strange echoing quality. "I don't have long before I'm gone completely. Let me make this count." She lunged at the Ice Walker with surprising speed. When they collided, there was a sound like a glacier carving, a deep, resonant crack. Laurel's partly frozen body began to merge with the creature's, and it reared back in what seemed like confusion. The ice around my legs shattered. "Run!" Laurel screamed, her voice barely human anymore. As much as it broke my heart, I did. I ran for the ice wall beneath the opening, jumping as high as I could and digging my fingers into tiny cracks in the surface. Behind me, Laurel and the Ice Walker struggled in some incomprehensible battle. Human warmth against ancient cold, scientist against the impossible thing she'd discovered. I climbed like my life depended on it, because it did. Below me, the animated corpses of the research team clawed at the ice, trying to follow. My fingers bled from the cold and sharp ice, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. When I reached the opening, I looked back once. Laurel was almost completely absorbed into the Ice Walker now, but she had forced it to its knees somehow. Her last human eye found mine across the distance. "Go." I saw her mouth the word. "Tell them." Then she and the creature collapsed into a writhing mass of ice and human flesh. The puppeted bodies of her colleagues fell lifeless to the ground as the Ice Walker lost its concentration. I squeezed through the crack into blessed sunlight, tears freezing on my face before they could fall. I stumbled through deep snow, the sun blinding after so long in the blue darkness of the glacier. My hands were bleeding and nearly frostbitten. My lungs burned with each breath of frigid air. But I was alive. Behind me, the crack in the glacier that had been my escape route was already sealing itself closed with fresh ice. I didn't know if Laurel's sacrifice had killed the Ice Walker or just slowed it down. I couldn't take any chances. Needed to get back to the research station. There might be a working radio there, or at least supplies I could use. The unnatural fog seemed to have lifted, and I could see the small building about half a mile away. As I trudged through knee-deep snow, I tried to make sense of what Laurel had told me. The Ice Walker was once human, an ancient tribal shaman who had somehow transformed himself into a winter spirit during a prehistoric ice age. It had been trapped in the glacier for thousands of years until climate change had freed it. Now, it was trying to gather enough energy through freezing living beings to trigger another ice age. It sounded crazy. A week ago, I would have laughed at such a story. But I'd seen too much now to doubt it. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow and pine. But there was something else in it, that cracking sound like breaking ice that seemed almost like words. The Ice Walker was communicating, or trying to. I walked faster. The sun was setting by the time I reached the research station. Inside, nothing had changed. Coffee mugs still sat on tables, computers still hummed. It was as if time had frozen here along with everything else. My first priority was communication. I tried the radio again, but got only static and those same backwards echoes of old conversations. The satellite phone still showed only frost patterns on its screen. There had to be another way to call for help. The research team would have had emergency protocols, backup systems. I searched through Laurel's desk and found what I was looking for, a bright orange emergency beacon. The kind that sends GPS coordinates to search and rescue when activated. It was small, about the size of a cell phone, with a simple button protected by a plastic cover. Just as I was about to press it, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath clouded in front of me. Frost began forming on the windows again, creating those same geometric patterns that seemed like a language. The ice walker had followed me. I ran to the supply closet and grabbed everything I could think of that might help. Road flares, hand warmers, a propane torch used for melting ice samples. Anything that could create heat. Outside, the sun had set completely. The darkness was broken only by the faint glow of the station's exterior lights. And in that half-light, I saw it. The ice walker gliding across the snow toward the building. It looked different now, its form less stable, with pieces of Laurel's humanity showing through in unsettling ways. I could see one human eye in its frozen face, looking at me with what might have been sadness. But it was still coming, still hungry, still determined to freeze the world. I pressed the button on the emergency beacon and shoved it into my pocket. Help would come eventually, but not soon enough. The ice walker reached the door of the station, frost spreading from its touch across the metal surface. The door began to crack under the extreme cold, weakening. I didn't wait for it to break in. I had a plan, not a good one, but the only one I could think of. The research station had a fuel depot out back, tanks of propane for heating and cooking, cans of gasoline for the snowmobiles and generators. Enough flammable material to create a very big fire. I grabbed my pack, stuffed it with the road flares and hand warmers, and headed for the back door. As I slipped out, I heard the front door shatter with a sound like breaking glass. The fuel depot was a small shed about 20 yards from the main building. I sprinted toward it, my boots crunching in the snow. Behind me, the temperature dropped so quickly that the air itself seemed to crystallize. I reached the shed and yanked the door open. Inside were 4 large propane tanks and several red gas cans, more than enough for what I needed. Working quickly, I arranged the tanks and cans in the center of the shed. From my pack, I took the road flares and placed them strategically around the fuel. Then I broke open the hand warmers and scattered them on top. The chemical reaction would give me a few extra minutes before the flares ignited. Just as I finished, the shed door swung open. The ice walker stood there, silhouetted against the night sky. Up close, I could see how Laurel's features were being absorbed and transformed within its icy form. One human arm, one crystalline, that single human eye, watching me. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to the creature or to what remained of Laurel within it. I struck the last road flare and dropped it into the middle of my makeshift bomb. Then I ran for the only other exit, a small window at the back of the shed. I dove through the window just as the temperature in the shed dropped low enough to freeze the inside of my lungs. Outside, I hit the snow and kept running, not looking back. I made it about 50 yards before the explosion hit. The force knocked me forward onto my face in the snow. Heat washed over my back in a wave, so intense it felt like my jacket might melt. When I rolled over and looked back, the shed was a fireball, flames reaching 30 feet into the air. The main building of the research station had caught fire too. Against the orange glow of the flames, I saw a shadow, the ice walker, caught in the explosion, its form melting and refreezing, trapped in an endless cycle. of destruction and rebirth. It let out that glass-breaking scream again, but this time it sounded almost human, almost like Laurel. I turned away and kept running. The emergency beacon was still in my pocket, sending its signal. Eventually, someone would come looking, but I couldn't wait here, not with that thing still partially alive. I headed down the mountain path, the same one I'd hiked up what felt like a lifetime ago. The snow was deep and my legs were already exhausted, but fear kept me moving. Behind me, the fire raged against the night sky, a beacon of warmth in this frozen hell. Hours passed. The cold seeped into my bones despite my layers. My right leg with its steel rod ached with every step. Twice I stopped to rest, but each time I heard that ice-cracking language on the wind and started moving again. Dawn was breaking when I saw the first helicopter. It came from the direction of park headquarters, drawn by the smoke still rising from what remained of the research station. I waved my arms frantically, afraid they might miss me among the trees and snow. Chatushim helicopter circled once, then began to descend to a clear patch nearby. I stumbled toward it, relief making my legs weak. Just as the helicopter touched down, I felt a familiar cold creeping up my spine. I turned to look back up the mountain. In the distance, a figure stood watching. Not the ice walker as I had known it, but something new. It had Laurel's shape now, but made entirely of ice that glinted in the dawn light. It raised one crystalline hand, almost like a farewell. Then it turned and walked back toward the glacier, each step leaving frozen footprints that quickly filled with snow. I didn't tell the rescue team everything. How could I? They'd think I was crazy, suffering from hypothermia and hallucinations. I told them about finding the station empty, about the extreme cold, about setting the fire as a signal when communications failed. I told them Laurel and her team must have gone to the glacier and gotten trapped somehow. They sent search parties, of course. They found nothing but natural ice formations. No bodies, no ice walker, no evidence of anything unusual. The official report blamed an equipment malfunction for the fire and exposure for the disappearance of the research team. Only I know the truth. It's been 6 months since that day. I'm back on duty as a park ranger, though desk work mostly. The frostbite took 2 of my toes and left my hands sensitive to cold. The doctors say I'm lucky it wasn't worse. Sometimes, when the weather turns cold, my old wounds ache. And sometimes, in that pain, I hear whispers, ice cracking in patterns that almost make sense, almost like words. Last week, I found a perfect, geometric frost pattern on my bedroom window. Shapes like the ones I'd seen on the glacier. When I touched it, it didn't melt like normal frost should. And sometimes I dream of Laurel, not as she was, but as she is now. Ice given human form, walking the deepest parts of the glacier, waiting. The scientists say climate change is melting our glaciers faster than ever. Soon there might not be any left in Glacier National Park. I wonder what will happen then. What else might melt free from the ancient ice? What other hungry things might wake up? But those are questions for another day. For now, I do my job. I warn hikers about the normal dangers. Bears, exposure, getting lost. I don't tell them about the other things, the impossible things. They wouldn't believe me anyway. At night, though, I keep my father's old Zippo lighter on my bedside table. And when winter comes, I sleep with it in my hand, flame ready to ignite. Because I know the ice walker is still out there, and it remembers me. I know this because sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see tiny ice crystals forming in the corners of my eyes, too perfect to be natural, too geometric to be random. The doctors can't explain the strange patterns growing in the scars where my frostbite was worst. They've never seen anything like it, they say, but I know what it is. The ice walker isn't just out there in the glacier. It's in me now, too. A small piece of it, growing colder every day. And winter is coming. My name is Daniel Rodriguez. I've been a park ranger at Redwood National Park for almost 7 years now. Before that, I was a smoke jumper, one of those crazy folks who parachute into wildfires. But that's a story for another time. Today started like any other day. I woke up early in my small cabin near the ranger station, had my coffee, and headed out for my daily patrol. There's something special about these redwoods. They're like giants from another time, standing tall and quiet. When I walk among them, it feels like being in a huge church, with sunlight coming through the leaves in golden lines. The birds were singing their morning songs as I hiked along my usual trail. Water bubbled over rocks in the small streams, and everything smelled of wet earth and green things growing. This smell, it's like the breath of the forest itself. Rich soil and old leaves breaking down to feed new life. I stopped to take a deep breath, filling my lungs with that clean forest air. In a small clearing just off the trail, I spotted a Roosevelt elk and her baby grazing peacefully. They didn't even look up as I passed by. That's how it should be in a protected place like this, the animals knowing they're safe from harm. But something felt different today. I noticed it first when I reached the junction where trails split off in 3 directions. The markers were wrong. Some pointed the wrong way, others were missing completely. I've walked these paths hundreds of times, so I knew my way around. But visitors could easily get lost with messed up signs like these. I made a note in my small notebook to fix them later, wondering who could have tampered with them. Maybe some teenagers playing a prank? But we hadn't had many visitors lately, and the changes seemed too deliberate. As I was writing, a shadow passed overhead. I looked up quickly, expecting to see a bird. But whatever cast that shadow was much bigger than any bird in these parts. The strange thing was, I didn't hear any sound. No wing flaps, no branches moving. Just silence and that dark shape moving through the trees above. Walking further, I came across something that made me stop in my tracks. 3 massive redwoods, some of the oldest in this section, had deep cuts in their trunks. Not the kind made by bears sharpening their claws. These marks were too high up, maybe 15 feet off the ground, and they formed patterns, almost like strange letters or symbols, too regular to be natural. As I stood there trying to make sense of the markings, I realized something else was wrong. The forest had gone completely quiet. No birds, no squirrels chattering, not even insects buzzing. Just a heavy silence that made my ears ring. In all my years working in forests, I'd never experienced such complete stillness. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then came the fog. Not the usual morning mist that burns off by midday, but something thicker that moved between the trees like it had a mind of its own. It didn't drift with the breeze like normal fog. Instead, it seemed to flow around obstacles, curling and stretching like fingers reaching through the forest. The hair on my arms stood up. Something wasn't right. The sun was starting to get low when I found the circle. Right in the middle of a normal section of forest floor was a perfect ring of bright red mushrooms. Inside the ring, nothing grew at all, just bare dirt. Outside, the ring, ferns and moss and tiny flowers covered every inch of ground. The contrast was shocking, like someone had drawn a perfect circle and erased everything inside it. I knelt down to get a closer look, but stopped myself from touching the mushrooms. My grandmother, who was indigenous to this region, had told me stories about fairy rings and the spirits that made them. "Respect the circles," she'd said. "They're doorways not meant for us." As a ranger with scientific training, I normally wouldn't give such ideas much thought. But here, with evening shadows growing longer and that unnatural fog creeping between the ancient trees, her warnings felt important. I took a few photos of the mushroom circle and marked the location on my GPS. As I stood up, I couldn't shake. The feeling that I was being watched, not by anything human, but by the forest itself. The redwoods that had seemed so welcoming this morning now loomed ominously, their massive trunks hiding whatever secrets the coming darkness would reveal. It was time to head back to the station. But something told me the strangeness I'd found. Today was just the beginning. I hurried back to the ranger station as the last light faded from the sky. My mind kept going back to those strange marks on the trees and that perfect circle of mushrooms. Most people think being a park ranger is all about helping lost hikers and telling folks not to feed the wildlife. That's part of it, sure. But there's more to these forests than most people ever see. I know because I've spent most of my life in them. Before I became a ranger here, I was a smoke jumper for 8 years. We'd jump out of planes right into the heart of forest fires, trying to stop them before they grew too big. It was dangerous work, but I loved my team. We were like family until 3 years ago. The Copper Ridge fire started small, but turned into a monster faster than anyone predicted. The wind changed suddenly, and part of our team got trapped. I tried to reach them. I can still hear their voices on the radio, getting more desperate as the flames closed in. I touched the burn scars on my left arm without thinking, hidden under my long-sleeved uniform. My constant reminder. I made it out. They didn't. After that, I couldn't jump anymore. The nightmares were too real, the guilt too heavy. So I transferred here, to the Redwoods. I figured if I couldn't save my friends, I could at least protect these ancient trees and keep people safe within them. Rodriguez, you're back late. Alexis Thompson was sitting at her desk, surrounded by plant samples and notebooks. She's the newest ranger here, about 10 years younger than me. Her eyes lit up behind her glasses when she saw me. Find anything interesting today? She asked, pushing back her chair. Alexis loves plants more than anyone I've ever met. She's here studying how climate change affects the redwood ecosystem, recording every tiny shift in what grows where. You could say that, I answered, pulling out my phone to show her the pictures of the weird tree marks and mushroom circle. She leaned in close, frowning. That's not normal fungal growth, she said, pointing to the mushrooms. And those marks, they're too systematic to be animal damage. That's what I thought too, I said, reaching into my pocket for my lucky charm. It's a small metal tag from my old smoke-jumping helmet, blackened by fire. I roll it between my fingers when I'm thinking or worried. It's a bad habit, but one I can't seem to break. I also found several trail markers moved or missing, I added, and there was this moment when all the forest sounds just stopped. Alexis looked up sharply. I experienced something similar yesterday in the north section. Complete silence for about 10 minutes. Then everything started up again like someone flipped a switch. A chill ran down my spine. I'm not the superstitious type. At least I try not to be. But my grandmother taught me about forest spirits when I was young. About respecting the hidden forces in wild places. I never talk about that stuff with the other rangers. They're all science and facts, but sometimes, in the deepest parts of these woods, I leave small offerings. Just a pinch of tobacco or a few seeds, call it covering all my bases. Tomorrow I want to check out that area again, I said, pointing to where I'd marked the mushroom circle on our map. Something's not right up there. Alexis nodded eagerly. I'll come with you. I want to collect samples from those mushrooms. I hesitated. Maybe we should wait for what? More rangers, park management approval? By then, whatever's happening might be gone, she argued. Besides, I need this for my research. I sighed. Alexis was smart, but sometimes too eager, too fearless. She hadn't seen the things I had. Didn't understand how quickly a safe situation could turn deadly. Fine, I agreed. But we follow protocol. Radio check-ins every hour, emergency supplies, the works. After Alexis left, I stayed late reviewing old reports, looking for anything similar to what I'd found today. There was nothing. But as I walked back to my cabin in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being followed. That night I had the dream again. I'm walking among the redwoods, but they're different, twisted, watching. Something moves between the trunks, always just out of sight. I call out, but my voice makes no sound. The thing comes closer, reaching for me with limbs that look like branches but move like arms. I woke up in a cold sweat, breathing hard. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. Outside my window, the forest was dark and still, too still. For a moment, I thought I saw a tall, thin figure standing at the edge of the trees, just a shadow among shadows. When I blinked, it was gone. Just PTSD playing tricks, I told myself, just like all those other times. But the next morning, when a visibly shaken hiker reported seeing someone made of sticks watching her from between the trees, I wasn't so sure anymore. After talking to the scared hiker, I met Alexis at the equipment shed to prepare for our trip back to the Mushroom Circle. The morning was foggy, with a chill that seeped into my bones. "Did you hear about the hiker's story?" I asked as we packed extra water and emergency supplies. Alexis nodded, her usual excitement dimmed. People see all kinds of things in these woods when they're alone. Their imagination runs wild. "Maybe," I said, not convinced. "But something strange is happening here." We set out just after 9, following my GPS coordinates from yesterday. The forest felt different today, tense, like the air before a thunderstorm. I kept my eyes moving, scanning between the massive tree trunks for anything unusual. About 2 miles in, I spotted something that made me stop dead in my tracks. "Alexis, look at this." She came over to where I was standing, in front of a massive redwood. The trunk had a large opening, almost like a doorway. But it wasn't a normal hollow. The inside was carved into a rough human shape, with spaces that looked like arms, legs, and a head. "That's weird," Alexis said, reaching out to touch the edges. "The inside is smooth, like something pressed itself out from within." I shone my flashlight inside. The hollow went deep into the tree, but the human-like shape was only near the opening. "There's another one over there," Alexis pointed. About 50 feet away stood another tree with a similar hollow. By lunchtime, we'd found 7 trees with these strange human-shaped cavities. Each one looked like something had pushed its way out, leaving behind a crude body print. We stopped to eat by a small stream, both of us quieter than usual. As Alexis unpacked our sandwiches, I checked the trail camera I'd set up last week to monitor elk movements. "That's strange," I muttered, looking through the photos. Most showed nothing but static, even though the motion sensor should have triggered for any passing wildlife. But 3 images made my blood run cold. In each one, partially hidden behind trees, stood tall figures that looked like they were made of branches and twigs. They were blurry and at the edge of the frame, but unmistakably shaped like people, if people could be 10 feet tall and impossibly thin. "Alexis, come look at this." She leaned over my shoulder, sandwich forgotten. "What am I looking at?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but they're in 3 different photos, taken hours apart." Her face paled. "Could be camera glitches, or someone playing a prank." "Maybe," I said, but we both knew better. Who would come this deep into the forest just to stand in front of a trail camera? We continued toward the Mushroom Circle, following the trail I'd marked yesterday. But something was wrong. "This can't be right," I said, checking my GPS again. "The circle should be right here." We were standing in a small clearing that looked nothing like the spot I'd found yesterday. No mushroom ring, no bare patch of earth. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Alexis asked. "Positive. These are the exact coordinates." We searched the area, finding nothing unusual, until Alexis called me over to a fallen log. "Daniel, look at this." My heart skipped a beat. Spread across the log were all the plant samples Alexis had collected yesterday. Leaves, moss, bark, and small flowers. But they weren't just dumped there. They were arranged in an intricate pattern, woven and twisted together to form a complex design. "Did you do this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No," she whispered. "I left these locked in my desk at the station last night." The pattern looked almost like writing, but in no language I'd ever seen. Some parts seemed to glow slightly in the dim forest light. I reached for my compass, needing to get my bearings. The needle spun wildly, rotating in complete circles before stopping, then spinning again. "My GPS is acting up too," Alexis said, showing me her device. The screen flickered and died despite having fresh batteries. "We should head back," I said, not liking how the forest had gone quiet again. "Mark this location and come back with more equipment tomorrow." As we turned to leave, Alexis gasped. About 100 yards away, a group of animals stood watching us, a mix that made no sense together. 2 deer, a fox, several raccoons, and even a black bear, all standing perfectly still in a semicircle like they were waiting for something. "Animals. Don't do that," Alexis whispered. "Predators and prey don't just stand together like that." "They do if they're afraid of something worse," I said quietly, remembering how animals fled together before the Copper Ridge fire. Something that scares them more than each other. On our way back, Alexis suddenly stopped and grabbed my arm. "Daniel, is that the same trail we came in on?" I looked around confused. The path looked similar, but something was off. Trees that should have been on our left were now on our right. A distinctive boulder I remembered passing wasn't there anymore. "No," I said slowly, "this isn't right. The trail has changed." "That's impossible," Alexis said, but her voice shook. "Trails don't just move." But I was already thinking about the altered trail markers I'd found yesterday. What if someone, or something, was changing the paths? By the time we made it back to the station, the sun was setting. We were both exhausted and jumpy, starting at every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those tree hollows shaped like people and the strange figures in the camera photos. Around midnight I heard a soft knock at my cabin door. It was Alexis, looking pale and scared. "I found something growing on me," she said, holding out her arm. There, growing from a small scratch on her wrist, was a tiny green shoot with 2 perfect leaves. I stared at the tiny green shoot growing from Alexis's scratch. It wasn't like anything I'd seen before. Too perfect, too deliberate in how it curved toward the light. "How long has this been there?" I asked, carefully examining her wrist without touching the plant. "I noticed it about an hour ago. At first, I thought it was just a piece of moss stuck to my skin, but—" She swallowed hard. "It's growing, Daniel. I can feel it." I grabbed my first aid kit and found tweezers and antiseptic. "Let me try to remove it." As gently as I could, I gripped the tiny stem with the tweezers. Alexis winced as I pulled. The shoot came out, trailing hair-thin roots that had already worked their way under her skin. "What is happening?" she whispered, looking at the spot, where small drops of blood mixed with a clear greenish fluid. "I don't know," I admitted, cleaning the wound, "but we need help. Tomorrow morning we'll radio for backup." But morning brought more problems. Our radios only produced static, and the phone lines were dead. Even the emergency satellite phone showed no signal. "We're cut off," I said, trying to stay calm. "We need to hike out to the highway and get help." Before we could leave, Sam Wilson, another ranger, rushed in. His face was gray with shock. "You need to see this," he said, leading us to the visitors' center parking lot. The sight stopped me cold. Every vehicle had thick vines growing through the engines, twisting around axles and through windows. The plants looked like normal forest, a growth, but no plant could grow that fast overnight or with such clear purpose. It's like they knew exactly where to grow to disable the engines, Alexis murmured. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving against the trees at the forest edge. Not cast by anything, but moving on its own across the trunks. When I looked directly at it, it vanished. "Did you see that?" I asked. Both Alexis and Sam shook their heads. Throughout the morning, reports came in from the few visitors and staff. In the park, trail maps no longer matched the actual paths. People heard whispering sounds when nobody was around. Everyone's electronics were failing. By noon, I'd organized the remaining rangers. Sam would stay with the visitors at the main center. Alexis and I would try to reach the highway for help, and everyone would carry emergency flares, the only thing still working reliably. As Alexis and I headed out, the forest felt alive in a way I'd never experienced before. Not the normal aliveness of plants and animals, but something watchful and thinking. We were about 2 miles from the station when I saw them clearly for the first time. "Don't move," I whispered to Alexis, slowly raising my hand to point. Between the trees ahead stood 3 figures. From a distance, they looked like people made of sticks and leaves, crude human shapes with branch-like limbs and hollows where faces should be. They stood perfectly still, blending so well with the forest that if they hadn't moved slightly, I might have missed them completely. "The Hollow Men," Alexis breathed. "What?" "That's what I'm calling them," she said, her voice shaking. "They're empty inside, like those hollows we found in the trees." As we watched, one of the figures suddenly fell apart, collapsing into a pile of twigs and leaves. But then the pieces moved on their own, crawling and tumbling through the undergrowth before reforming into a different shape several yards away. "They can change," I said. "That's how they've been moving the trails. They're rebuilding the forest around us." Suddenly, Alexis grabbed my arm. "Listen." At first, I heard nothing. Then it came, a creaking, rustling sound that rose and fell like speech. The sounds had rhythm and pattern, like a language made from the noises of the forest itself. "They're talking," Alexis whispered. One of the creatures turned its hollow face toward us. I knew it couldn't have heard us from that distance, but somehow it sensed we were there. "Run," I said quietly. "Now!" We turned and sprinted away from the figures. Behind us, the creaking language grew louder, more urgent. I risked a glance back and saw the forest floor rippling as if alive, the Hollow Men gliding over it with impossible speed. We ducked behind a massive fallen redwood. The creatures flowed past our hiding spot, their bodies shifting and changing as they moved, sometimes looking almost human, other times barely more than moving piles of forest debris. When they were gone, we continued toward the highway, but more carefully now. Every shadow might be one of them. Every rustle might be their strange language. An hour later, we found what had once been the main road out of the park. Now it was completely overgrown. Massive roots buckled the asphalt, and trees that would have taken decades to grow now blocked the way completely. "This isn't possible," Alexis said, touching a sapling that was already taller than her. "Nothing grows this fast." I remembered the creatures controlling the plants, making them grow where they wanted. "They've sealed us in." As the day wore on, we discovered more disturbing things. Animals with plants growing from their fur, moving stiffly like puppets. Birds with leaves instead of some feathers, flying in unnaturally perfect formations. Most terrifying was what we found in a remote camping area. A deer standing motionless in a clearing, its body split open but still alive, with something like a human face forming from leaves and twigs inside the wound. "They're experimenting," I said, feeling sick, "learning how to make themselves more real." By evening, we'd worked our way back toward the ranger station, having found no way out of the park. The Hollow Men seemed to be everywhere now, watching. From behind trees, following silently just out of sight. As darkness fell, Alexis stopped suddenly on the trail, her hand going to her wrist where I'd removed the plant shoot. "Daniel," she said, her voice strange, "I can hear them." "What?" "In my head. Their voices, they're curious about us." She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "They've been here before, sleeping under the forest. Something woke them up. The changing climate, new chemicals in the soil, something. And now they're trying to understand us." "How do you know this?" I asked, but I already feared the answer. She pulled up her sleeve. Where the small plant had been removed, tiny green filaments now spread under her skin like veins. "It's in my blood," she whispered, "and it's growing." As if confirming her words, a deep rumbling vibration passed through the ground beneath our feet. In the distance, massive roots erupted from the soil, twisting into humanoid shapes that clawed at the darkening sky. The entire forest was awakening, and we were trapped inside it. Night fell as Alexis and I hurried back toward the ranger station. The forest had changed again. Paths twisted in new directions, trees seemed closer together, and the air felt thick and hard to breathe. When we finally reached the visitor center, I knew something was terribly wrong. The lights were out, and the place was silent. "Sam," I called out, pushing open the door. No answer. We searched the building with our flashlights. The main hall was empty, but something caught my eye on the floor. Thin trails of soil and leaves, leading down the hallway toward the back rooms. Following the trails, we found them. Not just Sam, but all the visitors and staff we'd left behind. They were pressed against the walls, wrapped in cocoons of living wood and vines. Only their faces showed, eyes closed as if sleeping. From their mouths and noses grew small green shoots, reaching toward the light of our flashlights. "Are they alive?" Alexis whispered. I checked Sam's neck for a pulse. It was there, but slow and weak. "Yes, the plants are keeping them alive, like they're growing them," Alexis said, her voice breaking, "like a garden." That's when I noticed the wooden tendrils slowly creeping toward our feet. The floor itself was coming alive, trying to trap us too. "We need to go, now." We backed away, but Alexis suddenly doubled over in pain. "Daniel," she gasped, "it's spreading." The green lines under her skin had spread from her wrist up her arm and were now creeping toward her heart. I could see them, pulsing with each heartbeat. "We need to get you help," I said, half carrying her outside. "There's no help," she whispered, "but I can feel what they're doing. The Hollow Men, they're connected to something older, something that's been here longer than the redwoods. What is it?" "It's a giant fungus, a single organism spreading for miles underground. It's using the trees like fingers, and now it's trying to use us too." We made it to my cabin, but I knew we wouldn't be safe for long. Outside, the forest was changing faster now. Trees moved like they had muscles, their branches reaching toward the cabin windows like curious hands. Alexis collapsed on the couch, shivering. The green lines had reached her neck. "They've done this before," she said, her eyes unfocused. "Every few hundred years, they wake up and harvest. They take people and animals to learn from them, to evolve. They want to move, to be free of the forest floor." Her eyes suddenly cleared. "They're coming. They know we're not in the cocoons." I heard it then, the creak and rustle of their strange language all around the cabin. Looking out the window, I saw them gathering in the darkness. Dozens of Hollow Men, some now looking almost perfectly human, made entirely of forest materials. One stepped forward, its body more finished than the others. It had a face now, features that looked like they were copied from one of the cocooned visitors, but made of polished wood and woven leaves. Then it spoke, not in creaks and rustles, but in a human voice that was horribly familiar. "Daniel Rodriguez," it said in Sam's voice. "We would speak with you." Alexis grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. "Don't answer it. They're learning too fast." The cabin creaked as roots began pushing through the floorboards. Vines snaked through the cracks around the windows. "What do we do?" I asked, looking for any weapon, any way out. Alexis's face was pale, the green lines now reaching her temples. "Fire," she whispered. "They fear fire. I can feel it in their thoughts." Fire, my oldest fear, the thing that had taken my friends and left me scarred. But Alexis was right. These were plant creatures. Fire would be their weakness. I grabbed my emergency pack and pulled out the flares. "We need to make a controlled burn," I said. "Push them back long enough to get to the highway." "There's more," Alexis said, her voice getting weaker. "The mushrooms circle, and it's their doorway. Where they come through from below, if we can burn it, seal it off." I nodded, trying not to think about how much the forest floor had already transformed. We'd have to find that circle again in a forest that kept changing around us. Outside, the hollow men were pressing closer to the cabin. The one with Sam's voice called out again, "Your friend is becoming one of us. Soon she will. Join our mind, you will join too." I looked at Alexis. She nodded weakly. "I'll help you find the circle, but hurry. I can feel my thoughts changing." We burst out the back door, flares in hand. I struck one, and the searing red light pushed back the darkness. The nearest hollow men recoiled, their wooden bodies creaking, as they retreated from the heat and light. We ran, following a path of fear that only Alexis could see. "This way," she gasped, pulling me through gaps between trees that seemed to close behind us. Behind us, the forest floor rippled as the hollow men followed, always just out of reach of the flare's light. When the first flare died, I lit another, trying to ignore the memories of flames and screams that filled my head. "There," Alexis finally said, pointing ahead to a clearing. The mushroom circle was there, but it had grown. The ring was now 30 feet across, the mushrooms taller and glowing with an eerie blue light. Inside the circle, the ground had opened into a pit filled with pulsing fungal growth that spread outward like a web. "That's their center," Alexis said, "the core of the hive mind." As we approached the edge of the circle, dozens of hollow men emerged from the trees around us, forming a ring of their own. They didn't attack. They simply waited, watching. "They want to see what we'll do," Alexis whispered. "They're learning from us every second." I handed her a flare. "Can you hold them back?" She nodded, striking the flare and holding it toward the nearest creatures. They kept their distance, but didn't retreat. I turned to the mushroom circle. This close, I could feel the strange energy coming from it, ancient and alien and hungry. I knew that if I destroyed it, the hollow men would lose their connection to whatever controlled them, but I needed more than just flares. Looking around, desperately, I spotted a fallen branch soaked in resin, perfect kindling. I grabbed it and wrapped my spare shirt around the end. "What are you doing?" Alexis asked, her voice sounding less human now, more like the rustling speech of the hollow men. "Making a torch," I said, lighting the cloth with my last flare. "Stay back." The torch caught quickly, the resin making the flames hot and bright. The hollow men retreated further, their wooden bodies swaying nervously. "Daniel!" Alexis called, her voice urgent. "They know what you're planning. They're going to try to stop you." As if on cue, the ground beneath my feet began to move. Roots shot up, trying to wrap around my ankles. I jumped back, swinging the torch to keep them at bay. Alexis screamed. The green lines on her skin were glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with the mushroom circle. "Hurry, I can't hold them back much longer." I knew what I had to do. With one last look at Alexis, I ran forward and jumped into the mushroom circle, torch held high. The sensation was horrible, like plunging into cold, thick liquid that immediately tried to crawl inside my clothes, my mouth, my ears. The fungal mass reached for me with ropey tendrils, but the fire held them back. I pushed deeper toward the center of the circle where a large, brain-like fungal mass pulsed with blue light. This was the heart of it, the controlling mind that had awakened after centuries of sleep. As I raised the torch, I heard Alexis's voice in my head. "It will just grow back, Daniel, unless someone stays to keep it contained." I knew she was right. This thing was too old, too powerful to be destroyed so easily, but it could be trapped, sealed off from the world above by someone who knew what they were facing. The decision was made in an instant. I thrust the torch into the heart of the fungal mass, and it writhed in pain as flames spread across its surface. Then I pulled out my last 3 flares and rammed them into the burning center. "Alexis!" I shouted. "Run! Get everyone out!" The blue light turned angry red as fire consumed the fungal brain. The hollow men around the circle began falling apart, their coordinated movements failing as the controlling mind burned. I fought my way back to the edge of the circle, but the tendrils were wrapping around my legs, pulling me back. Through the Flames and smoke. I saw Alexis stumbling away, the green lines on her skin fading as her connection to the hive mind was severed. "Go!" I shouted. "I'll hold it here." The last thing I saw before the smoke blinded me was Alexis running toward the ranger station, moving freely now as the forest's grip weakened. I don't know how long I fought in that circle, using burning branches to keep the fungus at bay as it tried to rebuild itself. Hours, maybe. The flames spread in a controlled ring, burning the fungal network, but not jumping to the greater forest. Like the fire itself knew what needed to be destroyed. When dawn came, I was still there, exhausted but alive. The mushroom circle was gone, replaced by a ring of ash. The hollow men had collapsed into piles of ordinary forest debris, and the trees were just trees again. Later, I learned that Alexis had made it back to the station. She'd freed the cocooned people before the living wood could fully take hold, though many had weird scars and strange dreams afterward. Help, eventually, came when a Forest Service helicopter spotted the smoke from my fire. I told them it was a lightning strike, a small wildfire I'd managed to contain. No one would have believed the truth anyway. That was 3 months ago. I'm still here at Redwood National Park. Someone needs to watch for signs of the hollow men returning. The fungus isn't dead, something that ancient doesn't die easily. It's just sleeping again, waiting for the right time to wake up. Alexis recovered mostly. The green lines faded from her skin, but sometimes when she's tired, you can see them faintly under certain light. She says she doesn't hear the voices anymore, but sometimes I catch her listening to the wind in the trees with a strange expression on her face. As for me, I've made peace with fire again. It saved us, after all. But on my daily patrols, I watch for mushroom circles and listen for silence in the forest. And sometimes, when I sweat from nightmares about that night, tiny seedlings appear on my skin, so small you'd hardly notice them unless you knew what to look for. The forest is quiet now, but I know better than anyone. Some things just wait for the right moment to wake up. My name is Catherine Whitefeather. I've been a park ranger at Zion National Park for 7 years now. Most days I love my job. Today feels different. The sun is starting to set, painting the red sandstone cliffs with a golden orange glow that makes them look like they're on fire. It's my favorite time of day here. All the tourists have mostly gone back to their hotels or campgrounds, and I finally have the canyon to myself. I'm standing at the edge of a lookout point, watching the shadows grow longer across the valley. The Virgin River below looks like a thin blue ribbon winding between the massive red walls. The wind is gentle today, carrying the smell of juniper trees and the dusty scent that only comes from rocks that have been baking in the sun for millions of years. Above me, a golden eagle circles in the sky. I stop to watch it ride the warm air currents, barely flapping its wings. It's so perfect and free up there. I can't help but smile. With the crowds gone, the silence is deep. This is when you can really hear the desert if you listen carefully. Enough. The subtle rustling of small animals in the brush, the distant call of birds, the soft whisper of sand shifting in the breeze. But then I notice something odd. A small dust devil, like a tiny tornado of dust and sand, forms on the flat area about 50 yards away. It's strange because these usually happen during the hottest part of the day, not at sunset. And this one doesn't move randomly like they normally do. It spins in place, almost like it's watching me, before suddenly collapsing into nothing. I shake my head. I'm being silly. Dust devils aren't alive. But working alone out here sometimes makes my imagination work over time. I walk over to check out some ancient rock drawings, petroglyphs, that the Native Americans carved hundreds of years ago. I've seen these particular ones dozens of times, but today they look different somehow. I step to the side, and it almost seems like the figures move slightly when viewed from different angles. In 7 years, I've never noticed that before. My radio crackles to life, startling me. Catherine, you there? It's Jake from the north entrance. I'm here. What's up? We've been getting some weird reports about animal behavior today. Thompson says he saw a group of coyotes walking in perfect circles near Angel's Landing, and there's an unusual number of rattlesnakes gathered by Echo Canyon. Thought you should know since you're out there alone. Thanks for the heads up, I reply, feeling a slight chill despite the warm evening air. As the sun dips lower, the shadows stretch across the canyon floor. But something catches my eye. Some of the shadows seem to be moving in the wrong direction, against the path of the sun. I blink hard, and when I look again, everything seems normal. I must be more tired than I thought. That's when I spot them. Footprints, fresh ones, crossing the trail I'm on. They look human, but something's not right about them. They're deeper than they should be, like whoever made them was carrying something very heavy. And the stride is too long, much longer than a normal person's step. They're heading toward the restricted archaeological sites that I'm responsible for protecting. I bend down to examine them more closely, my heart beating a little faster now. In the fading light, I can make out another strange detail. The footprints seem to change slightly between steps, as if the foot itself was changing shape. I stand up, suddenly aware of how quiet it's become. No bird calls, no insect sounds, nothing but the soft whisper of the wind, which now feels less like a friend and more like someone breathing down my neck. I reach for my flashlight. The sun will be gone soon, and something tells me I need to follow these tracks before night fully takes over. Just doing my job, I mutter to myself, trying to ignore the growing sense that something is very wrong in my beloved canyon tonight. I should probably tell you a bit about myself. I'm not just any park ranger. I'm a Paiute woman. That's the Native American tribe that has lived in these lands for thousands of years. I studied archaeology in college because I wanted to protect the ancient sites where my ancestors once lived. Too many sacred places have been damaged by treasure hunters or just careless people who don't understand what they're seeing. My hands are rough and calloused from years of digging in the dirt and climbing over rocks. The desert sun has darkened my skin even more, but I don't mind. The sun and I are old friends. Last winter my grandmother died. That hit me hard. She was our tribe's last traditional healer, the last one who knew all the old medicines and songs. She knew things about this land that no science book could ever teach you. When the doctors told her she had cancer, she accepted it with a calm that I still don't understand. Everything returns to the earth, she told me. The small leather pouch hanging from my belt was hers. She gave it to me before she died and made me promise never to open it unless I absolutely had to. There are things inside that will protect you, she said, but only in the greatest need. I've kept that promise, though sometimes I'm tempted to peek inside. As I follow these strange footprints, I hear someone calling my name. It's Dr. Richard Holloway, an archaeologist who's been working with me at Zion for the past month. He's investigating reports that someone might be disturbing the ancient burial grounds. Catherine, there you are, he says, slightly out of breath as he catches up to me. I've been looking everywhere for you. Richard is in his 50s, with grey hair and glasses that keep sliding down his nose. He's smart, really smart, but he doesn't believe in anything he can't measure or put under a microscope. I was just checking out these tracks, I tell him, pointing to the ground. Don't they seem strange to you? He bends down, squinting in the fading light. Probably just a hiker who wandered off the trail. Big guy, heavy pack. I shake my head. The stride is too long, and look how they change between steps. Richard straightens up and gives me that look. The one I've seen too many times from scientists who think my native intuition is cute, but not serious. You see things others don't, Catherine. "That's what makes you good at your job," he says, kindly. But I can tell he doesn't really see what I'm seeing. That's always been my struggle, having one foot in the world of science and facts, and one foot in the world of my people's knowledge. Most of the time it's a gift, seeing both sides, but sometimes it feels like a heavy weight to carry. I need to follow these, I say firmly. Someone's heading toward the restricted sites. Richard nods. "I'll come with you. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something strange we found today." As we walk, the sky grows darker. I switch on my flashlight and the beam catches something on a nearby rock. It's a petroglyph, an ancient carving, of a figure that's half human, half animal. I've seen it many times before, but tonight it seems to almost vibrate with meaning. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about this land," I say quietly. "Not just the history that tourists hear, but the older stories, about beings that could change their skin, creatures that weren't quite human or animal, but something in between." "Skinwalkers," Richard says, surprising me. He's been doing his homework. "Navajo legends, right?" "Paiute too," I correct him, "but I always thought they were just stories meant to teach lessons, ways to explain the unexplainable." Richard is quiet for a moment. "Science can't explain everything yet, Catherine." That's a surprising admission from him. I think about the dreams I've been having lately. Dreams where I see my grandmother's face watching me from the shadows. But something's not quite right about her eyes. I've been telling myself it's just her grief, my mind's way of processing her loss. But now I'm not so sure. "Did your assistant ever show up?" I ask, changing the subject. "Mark was supposed to meet us hours ago with supplies for tomorrow's dig." Richard's face tightens with worry. "No, that's partly why I was looking for you. It's not like him to be late, and he's not answering his radio." A cold feeling settles in. My stomach that has nothing to do with the cooling desert night. Those strange tracks we're following, could they be connected to Mark's disappearance? "Let's pick up the pace," I say, moving faster along the trail. "And keep your eyes open. Something doesn't feel right out here tonight." The beam of my flashlight bounces across the rocky ground, illuminating the strange footprints that seem to be leading us deeper into the canyon, into places where the tourists never go, places where the oldest stories say you shouldn't wander after dark. The moon rises over the canyon as Richard and I follow the strange footprints. They lead us to one of the ancient burial sites that's supposed to be protected and untouched. What we find there stops us both in our tracks. "That's not possible," Richard whispers. "The ground has been dug up, but not with shovels or any tool I've ever seen. It looks like something tore into the earth with giant claws, leaving deep furrows in the soil. The dirt is piled neatly to the side, not scattered like you'd expect. No animal did this," I say, kneeling down to examine the marks. "And no human either." Richard shakes his head, his flashlight beam trembling slightly. "There has to be an explanation, flash flood maybe, in this dry weather, and look how precise it is. This was done with purpose." As we look around more, things get even stranger. About 20 feet away, we find a dead coyote, but it's not just lying there like a normal dead animal. It's arranged carefully, its legs positioned in an odd pattern. When I get closer, I see something that makes my skin crawl. Its organs have been removed with surgical precision, and there's no blood anywhere. "Richard, look at this." He comes over, and I can see the color drain from his face. "This isn't right," he mutters. "This isn't right at all." My flashlight catches something shiny in the dirt nearby. I reach down and pick up a small voice recorder. The kind researchers use to take notes in the field. "That's Mark's," Richard says, grabbing it from my hand. He presses play. At first, there's just the sound of footsteps and Mark's breathing as he walks. Then he says, "Day 14 at Site B. I'm heading back to camp but wanted to check out that strange rock formation first. Dr. Holloway's going to love this." The recording goes quiet for a moment. Then we hear Mark again, his voice now hushed and frightened. There's somebody watching me from the rocks. Hello, are you park staff? Silence, then footsteps running. Mark's breathing gets faster, panicked. Who are you? What do you want? And then a sound that makes my blood freeze. It's not quite human, not quite animal. A series of clicks and growls that somehow form words. Your face. Mark screams and the recording ends. Richard and I stand there in shocked silence. My hand moves instinctively to my grandmother's medicine pouch. We need to call this in, I finally say. Get search and rescue out here. Richard nods, still staring at the recorder. What was that sound, that voice? I don't know. But deep down, I feel like maybe I do know. Like my grandmother's stories are suddenly becoming very real. I reach for my radio, but before I can call for help, something catches my eye. In the pit where the earth was dug up, there's a piece of pottery. I recognize it immediately. It's from the ancestral Puebloan period, at least 800 years old. But here's the strange part. Last week, this same piece was broken into dozens of fragments. We had carefully documented them. Now it's whole again. Perfect. Like it was never damaged. I pick it up carefully. The surface is covered with a strange, sticky resin I've never seen before. Richard, remember this pot? The broken one from last week? He takes it, frowning. That's impossible. We catalogued all the pieces. He turns it over in his hands. And what is this substance? Before I can answer, a noise from the darkness makes us both turn. A coyote is standing about 20 feet away, watching us. There's something wrong with the way it's standing. Too tall, too straight. As we watch in disbelief, the coyote rises up on its hind legs. And then, in a movement that defies everything I know about nature, its body seems to twist and fold in on itself, feathers bursting from its skin. In seconds, where the coyote stood, there's now a raven. The bird caws once, a sound that seems almost like laughter, and flies away into the night. Richard drops the pot, which somehow doesn't break when it hits the ground. Did you see that? His voice is shaking. Yes, I whisper. That can't be real. We're dehydrated, tired. Our minds are playing tricks on us. I want to believe him, I really do. But I know what I saw. Let's get back to camp, I say. We need water and rest. Our campsite is about a mile away in a small cleared area that park staff use during extended fieldwork. As we walk back in tense silence, I can't shake the feeling that we're being followed, watched from the shadows between the rocks. When we reach camp, another shock awaits us. During the few hours we were gone, something has circled our entire campsite with tracks, perfect unbroken circles of footprints that go all the way around our tents and equipment. My dog, Ranger, a German shepherd trained to alert at any intruders, is huddled in my tent whimpering. This isn't possible, Richard says for what feels like the 100th time tonight. We have motion sensors set up. They should have gone off if anything came near camp. I check the sensors. They're still active, batteries full, no sign of tampering. Whatever made these tracks, I say slowly. The sensors didn't detect it. Richard sits heavily on a camp chair, running his hands through his hair. Catherine, what is happening here? I'm about to answer when our radio crackles to life. But instead of the normal Park Service channel, we hear voices speaking in a language I barely recognize. It's Paiute, but an ancient version, with words that haven't been used in hundreds of years. I can only make out bits and pieces. Wearing the skin and borrowing the face. The transmission cuts off suddenly. Richard looks at me, waiting for a translation. It's an old form of my language, I tell him. Very old. Nobody speaks like that anymore. What did it say? I hesitate. Nothing good. That night, neither of us sleeps well. Richard develops a strange rash where he handled the reconstructed pot. Red marks that look eerily like the same symbols carved into the pottery. In the morning, as I wash my face in a basin of water, I notice something that sends a chill through me. For just a split second, my reflection moves differently than I do. A slight delay, like it's watching me, copying me. And did my reflection just smile? I splash the water, breaking the image. It must be lack of sleep playing tricks on me. It has to be. But deep down, I know the danger is just beginning. The next morning we decide to search for Mark. The air feels heavy, like right before a storm, though the sky is clear blue. We pack extra water, first aid supplies, and our radios. I bring my grandmother's medicine pouch too, hanging it around my neck instead of on my belt. Somehow it feels safer that way. As we hike up a narrow trail between two massive red rock walls, Richard stops suddenly. "Catherine," he whispers, pointing ahead. "Look." Standing on a ridge about 100 yards away is an elderly woman. Even from this distance, my heart nearly stops. She looks exactly like my grandmother. Same silver hair in a braid, same blue dress she always wore, same way of standing with her hands folded in front of her. Grandmother. The word slips out. Before I can stop it, Richard looks at me confused. "You know her? It looks like my grandmother, but she died last winter." The figure doesn't move. She just stands there watching us. "Hello," Richard calls out. "Ma'am, this area is restricted." The woman finally moves, but something is wrong with how she walks. It's fluid, too fluid, like her joints bend in ways they shouldn't. She glides across the rocky ground, and then, in a movement too quick to follow, slips into a crack in the rock face, a crack far too small for a human body. Richard runs forward to where she disappeared. I follow, my heart pounding. "There's no way anyone could fit through here," he says, examining the narrow crack. "It's barely 6 inches wide." "Then what did we just see?" I ask, though I'm afraid I already know the answer. We continue our search for Mark, calling his name every few minutes. The only responses are our own echoes bouncing back from the canyon walls. "Mark! It's Dr. Holloway! Can you hear me?" And then, from somewhere ahead, "Richard, over here, I'm hurt." It's Mark's voice, clear as day. Richard's face lights up with relief. "That's him, Mark." He starts running toward the voice. I grab his arm, pulling him back. "Wait, something's not right." "What do you mean?" "That's Mark." "Richard, listen to me. In all the years I've worked with him, has Mark ever called you Richard instead of Dr. Holloway?" His face falls as he realizes I'm right. Mark is always formal, always respectful. The voice calls again. "Richard, Catherine, help me." It's perfect, Mark's voice exactly. But now there's something else behind it, a subtle clicking sound. "Don't answer," I whisper, "and don't follow that voice." We change direction, heading back toward our camp. As we walk, I notice something disturbing on the ground. Little pieces of what looks like dried skin and clumps of hair. Not all of it is human. There's coyote fur, eagle feathers, even what looks like snake skin, all mixed together in a trail. "What is this?" Richard asks, bending down to examine it. "Don't touch it," I warn. I think it's shedding. Shedding? Like a snake. Like something that changes what it is, often. Back at camp, Richard starts going through his notes frantically, looking for some scientific explanation for what we're experiencing. I radio the park headquarters for an update on the search for Mark, but the signal is weak, full of static. That night, Richard goes to check something in the ruins we were excavating. He's gone longer than he should be. When he finally returns, he seems different. His movements are stiffer. His smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Find anything interesting?" I ask carefully. "No, nothing at all." His voice has a strange flatness. "Do it." He sits across from me at the campfire. The flames cast shadows across his face, making him look like a stranger. "Tell me about your grandmother," he says suddenly. "The healer. What kind of medicines did she make?" A chill runs through me. I never told Richard my grandmother was a healer. "Why do you want to know?" I ask. "Just curious about your people's ways." His head tilts at an odd angle. The old ways, the powerful ways. I stand up trying to stay calm. I'm going to check the perimeter. Richard's eyes reflect the firelight strangely, like an animal's. Don't go too far, Catherine Whitefeather. It's not safe in the dark. The way he says my full name sends ice through my veins. I walk away from the fire, my hand clutching my grandmother's pouch. When I'm out of sight, I circle back and watch Richard from behind a large boulder. What I see makes my blood freeze. He's standing now, but his movements are all wrong, jerky, then too smooth. He puts his hand into the fire and doesn't react when his flesh should be burning. And then just for a moment, his face ripples like there's something underneath, pushing to get out. This isn't Richard, not anymore, or at least not completely. I back away quietly, trying to figure out what to do. That's when I hear a twig snap behind me. I spin around and find myself face to face with myself. It's like looking in a mirror, except this version of me has eyes that are completely black and a smile that's too wide for a human face. Catherine, it says in my voice. Catherine! I stumble backward. The copy of me takes a step forward. Your grandmother knew me, it says. She hid from me, but you brought me gifts. You dug up my prison. My back hits a rock wall. There's nowhere to run. What are you? I whisper. I'm hunger. I am many. I wear the skins of those I take. It reaches out with my own hand. Your skin will fit me well. In desperation, I grab my grandmother's pouch and hold it up like a shield. The thing that looks like me hisses and backs away. The old woman's magic, it snarls, its face twisting into something inhuman. She trapped pieces of me, bound me. But your digging set me free. It retreats into the shadows, its form shifting and changing as it goes. One moment looking like me, then like the old woman on the ridge, then something I can't even describe. I'll wear you soon, it calls back. I'll wear all of you. I run back to camp, terrified. The Richard thing is gone. I gather my courage and check his tent. He's there, asleep, looking normal. But when I whisper his name, he opens his eyes and seems confused. Catherine, what's wrong? He sounds like himself again. Richard, what were you doing at the ruins earlier? He sits up, rubbing his head. Ruins? I haven't left camp. I've been sleeping for hours. You don't remember talking to me by the fire? Asking about my grandmother? He looks genuinely confused. No, I remember sitting down to review my notes and then nothing, like a blank spot in my memory. I tell him everything, the thing that looked like me, what it said about being trapped and set free by our digging. Catherine, he says slowly, I think I saw something too, when I was at the ruins. At least, I think I was at the ruins. He pulls up his sleeve, showing me his arm. There's a strange black mark there, like a handprint. Something touched me, and after that, it's all foggy. It's possessing you, I say. Not completely, but it's trying to. That's not possible, he argues, but there's doubt in his voice. There has to be a rational explanation. I take a deep breath. Richard, we're dealing with a skinwalker. An ancient evil my people have known about for generations. It doesn't just take forms, it takes essences, souls. He doesn't argue this time. What do we do? In the morning, we need to go back to where we first saw the disturbed burial site. I think that's where it started. And we need to be careful. It can look like anyone, even each other. That night, I don't sleep. I sit outside Richard's tent, watching. Occasionally, I hear him muttering in his sleep, sometimes in his own voice, sometimes in a voice that sounds much, much older. I look up at the stars and wonder if I'll ever see them the same way again. My radio crackles with static. Through the noise, I hear a voice, Mark's voice, whispering my name over and over, getting closer with each call. Morning comes after the longest night of my life. The sun rises over the Red Canyon walls, but it brings no comfort today. Richard looks terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. It was in my dreams, he whispers, talking to me, showing me things. What things? I ask. Things it's done, people it's worn. He shudders. Catherine, it wants you most of all. It kept saying your bloodline is special. A cold realization washes over me. My grandmother, she was a healer, a spiritual protector. This thing must have known her. I touch the medicine pouch around my neck. That's why it looks like her sometimes, and why it wants me. We pack up quickly and head toward the disturbed burial site. I have a feeling that whatever started this, whatever woke this creature up, began there. As we hike, dark clouds gather overhead. Unusual for this time of year. The air feels electric, charged with something more than just an approaching storm. Look, Richard says suddenly, pointing ahead. A search and rescue team is making its way down the trail toward us. 4 people in Park Service uniforms. I should feel relieved, but something feels wrong. Catherine, Dr. Holloway, calls the lead ranger, waving. We've been looking everywhere for you. I grab Richard's arm. Don't answer, I whisper. Look at how they're walking. The 4 people move in perfect unison, their steps matching exactly, like they're connected by invisible strings. It's not them, Richard whispers back. It's wearing them all at once. The skinwalker, now in 4 bodies, keeps coming toward us. All 4 faces wear the same empty smile. Run, I tell Richard. And we do. We sprint down a side trail, one that only locals know about. It leads to a hidden canyon where ancient cliff dwellings sit tucked into the rock face. As we run, I hear multiple voices calling our names, all with that same clicking undertone. We reach the cliff dwellings and duck inside an ancient doorway. These small rooms were built by my ancestors hundreds of years ago. Why here? Richard pants, out of breath. Because these places were built with protection in mind, I explain. Not just from weather and enemies, but from spirits. From things like what's chasing us. Richard suddenly doubles over in pain. Catherine, he gasps. It's getting stronger in me. I can feel it trying to take over. I help him sit against a wall. His eyes keep changing. One moment they're his. Normal brown, the next they're completely black. Fight it, Richard, stay with me. His body jerks and twists. Tie me up, he begs during a moment of clarity. I don't trust myself. Using rope from our packs, I secure his hands and feet. It feels wrong to tie up a friend, but I know it's necessary. Richard's not strong enough, he says suddenly. But the voice isn't his anymore. It's ancient, dry like old bones. His skin fits poorly. Yours will be better. I back away as Richard's face contorts into something inhuman. Then just as quickly, he's himself again, gasping and fighting for control. Catherine, he says in his own voice, open your grandmother's pouch. Now is the time. My hands shake as I finally untie the small leather bag I've carried for months. Inside I find dried herbs, a small carved stone figure, and a folded piece of paper with my grandmother's handwriting. The note is simple. The circle was not closed. You must finish what we started. There are instructions for a ritual, a binding. Ceremony that my ancestors used to trap this evil thing centuries ago. But there's a warning too. The binder and the bound will share a connection forever. Thunder crashes outside as I read. The storm is getting closer. Richard screams in pain, his body arching unnaturally. Hurry, he begs. I begin gathering what I need. The herbs from the pouch, red earth from the canyon floor, water from my canteen. Outside I hear voices, many voices, calling my name. The skinwalker is coming with all its stolen forms. I work quickly, mixing the ingredients as the instructions describe. I draw symbols on the ground around Richard with the red earth paste. Catherine Whitefeather, calls my grandmother's voice from outside. Let me in, child. Let me help you. Don't listen, Richard gasps. Not real. Lightning flashes, illuminating the small room. Rain begins to fall. A rare desert thunderstorm. Perfect timing, as the ritual requires flowing water from the sky. I work, Richard struggles against his ropes. Sometimes he's himself begging me to hurry. Other times, the thing inside him snarls and threatens, its voice ancient and full of hatred. "I've worn 1,000 skins," it hisses. "I'll wear 1,000 more. I'll wear yours while your spirit watches, trapped forever." The walls of the cliff dwelling begin to shake. Outside, I see shadows moving, dozens of them, all different shapes, and sizes. The skinwalker has gathered all its forms. I finish the preparations and stand in the center of the symbols I've drawn. According to the instructions, I need to recite words in the old language, words of binding and protection that have been passed down through generations of healers. As I begin to speak the ancient words, the storm reaches its peak. Lightning strikes so close that the air crackles with electricity. Thunder shakes the very ground beneath us. The skinwalker howls from a dozen throats. It knows what I'm doing. Richard's body convulses, and black smoke begins to pour from his mouth and eyes, the essence of the skinwalker being drawn out by the ritual. "Stop!" it screams with Richard's voice. "You don't know what you're doing. The cost is too high." But I continue, my voice growing stronger with each word. My grandmother's teachings flow through me. I understand now why this burden fell to me, why it had to be me. The black smoke swirls around the room, trying to find escape, but the symbols hold it in. It begins to take shape, a writhing mass of faces and limbs, constantly shifting and changing. In one moment, I see my grandmother's face, in another Mark's, then Richard's, and many others I don't recognize. "You cannot bind me forever," it snarls. "I am eternal. I am hunger." "You are not welcome here," I answer, completing the ritual with the final words. Lightning strikes the cliff dwelling directly. For a moment, everything is blindingly white. I feel a searing pain in my chest, like something reaching inside me and taking hold of my heart. Then darkness. When I wake, Richard is leaning over me, untied and looking like himself again. The storm has passed, leaving the desert air clean and fresh. "Catherine, can you hear me?" I sit up slowly. "Yes." "Are you... Is it gone?" He nods. "I think so. I feel like myself again." He looks around at the symbols, now smeared and fading. "What did you do?" "I finished what my ancestors started," I say. "The skinwalker was trapped here centuries ago, but the binding wasn't complete. When our excavations disturbed the site, it found a way to break free. And now? Now it's bound. Again." I touch my chest where the pain had been. There's a mark there now, a small, perfect handprint that wasn't there before. But the binding comes with a price. Richard helps me to my feet. "What price?" I look out at the canyon, glowing in the afternoon sun. I'm connected to it now, and to this place. I can feel it already, a tether linking me to the land, to the ancient ruins, to the thing trapped beneath it all. I'll have to stay, to make sure it remains bound. "You mean forever?" I nod slowly. "This is my home now, more than ever." We make our way back to headquarters. A real search team finds Mark a day later, alive but confused, with no memory of what happened to him after he left camp. Richard's memories of being partially possessed are fragmented, leaving him with questions science can't answer. He returns to his university, but he's changed. He writes to me sometimes, telling me about the strange things he now notices in the world, things he would have dismissed before. As for me, I continue my work as a park ranger at Zion, but now I have another job too, guardian of an ancient secret. Sometimes, when I look in still water, my reflection doesn't quite match my movements. Sometimes I hear whispers in the wind that sound like my grandmother, warning me to stay vigilant. The skinwalker is not gone. It's contained, bound by the ritual and by my own life force. I can feel it sometimes, testing its bonds, looking for weaknesses. But I am stronger than it knows. I carry the knowledge of my ancestors, the legacy of my grandmother. I will not fail in my duty. And so I walk the red earth paths of Zion Canyon, watching over both the living and the ancient things that sleep beneath the stone. I'm Catherine Whitefeather, Park Ranger and Guardian. This is my story. This is my purpose. And sometimes, when the moon is full and the shadows seem to move of their own accord, I touch my grandmother's medicine pouch and whisper, thanks to her for preparing me for this battle, a battle that is not over, but merely paused until the next chapter begins. My name is Michael Hayes. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 3 years now, and I've never seen anything like what happened last summer. Even now, months later, I struggle to make sense of it. It was a beautiful July morning when everything changed. I woke up early, like I always do, and hiked out to Alpine Lake to check the water levels. The sun was just coming up, sending golden light through the misty forest. Everything was dripping with dew, and the huge old cedar trees looked magical, with sunbeams cutting through them. I remember how peaceful it felt. Birds were singing all around me, and I could hear little animals moving through the bushes. Chipmunks, probably, or maybe rabbits. I took a deep breath of the pine-scented air and felt a calmness I hadn't experienced since before the war. Korea had left me with nightmares that followed me everywhere, but out here in the wilderness, I finally felt some peace. Then something strange happened. The mist started moving in ways it shouldn't. Instead of drifting gently with the breeze, it began swirling and gathering in thick patches, almost like it had a mind of its own. I stood watching it, confused, when I realized something else was wrong. The forest had gone completely silent. 1 second there was the normal chorus of birds and insects, and the next, nothing. Not a single chirp or buzz. Even the leaves had stopped rustling. It was like someone had suddenly turned off the sound of the entire forest. I reached for my radio to call headquarters. We're supposed to report anything unusual, and this definitely counted. But when I pressed the talk button, all I got was static. That didn't make sense. I was standing in a spot with perfect reception. I'd made calls from this exact place dozens of times before. Movement caught my eye at the edge of the trees. A mother deer and her baby stepped cautiously into the open. They both looked nervous, ears twitching and eyes wide. Suddenly, without any warning, they bolted, running like something terrifying was chasing them. But there was nothing there. Nothing I could see anyway. The air turned cold, really cold. I watched as tiny water droplets formed on my compass and radio. This was mid-July, but it felt like November now, and getting colder by the minute. I decided to head back to the ranger station. Somehow, the trail looked different than when I'd hiked in that morning. Trees I didn't recognize, rocks in new places. It was as if the forest had rearranged itself while I wasn't looking. I've walked these paths hundreds of times. I know them better than the streets of my hometown, but now I felt uncertain, almost lost. That's when I saw it. A strange fog rolling down from the mountain peaks. But it wasn't moving the way fog should. It was coming against the wind, flowing downhill like water, with purpose. I could have sworn it was searching for something. I picked up my pace, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. I should probably tell you a bit about myself. Like I said, my name is Michael Hayes. Before becoming a park ranger, I was a soldier in Korea. I saw things there that no person should ever have to see. When I came home, I couldn't stand being around crowds or loud noises. Everything reminded me of the war. That's why I came to Olympic National Park. I thought the quiet of the forest might help me forget. And for a while, it did. I carry an old photo in my pocket. It's of my brother Jack. He was also in Korea, but he didn't make it back. Sometimes I think, if I had been there that day, I could have saved him. That thought keeps me up at night. I still have bad dreams about the battlefield. I wake up sweating, thinking I'm back there. That's why when strange things started happening, in the forest, Part of me wondered if it was just my mind playing tricks. As I headed back toward the ranger station through that weird fog, I wasn't alone. Evelyn Porter was with me. She's a young student from the university who came to study the special kinds of moss and lichen that grow in our park. Smart girl, but city-raised. She didn't know the wilderness like I did. Something's not right, I told her, touching the compass hanging around my neck. It was my brother's before it was mine. A family treasure that had guided Hayes men for generations. But today, the needle was spinning wildly, pointing nowhere and everywhere. "What's happening?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaking a little. "I've never seen fog move like that. Probably just a weather pattern specific to these mountains," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "The Olympic Range creates its own climate sometimes, but I knew every trail, creek and rock formation in this sector. I'd even mapped parts that hadn't been properly documented since the 1930s, and nothing in my experience explained what was happening now." "Did you hear that?" Evelyn whispered, grabbing my arm. "Hear what?" "That whispering, like voices in the fog." I shook my head. "It's just the wind moving through the trees. City folks always think the forest sounds like whispering." She looked hurt, and I felt bad for dismissing her concerns, but I didn't want to admit that I was scared, too. I've never been good at showing when I'm afraid or worried. My dad raised me to be strong, to handle problems on my own. Asking for help wasn't something Hayes men did. What I didn't know then was that the local tribes had stories about this mountain. They called certain misty areas the places of theft people, spirits in the fog that could take a person's shape. If I had listened to those stories, maybe I would have been better prepared for what was coming. But at that moment, all I knew was that something was wrong in my forest. The place I thought I knew better than anyone was suddenly strange and threatening. And despite all my experience and training, I had no idea what we were up against. I gripped my flashlight tighter as we pressed on through the thickening mist. The ranger station couldn't be far now. At least I hoped it wasn't. The deeper we went into the forest, the stranger things got. I spotted some footprints in the mud near the lake shore that made my skin crawl. They were long, too long to be human, and they appeared and disappeared as if whatever made them was walking in and out of thin air. "What kind of animal makes prints like that?" Evelyn asked, kneeling down to look closer. "I've never seen anything like it," I admitted. "Not bear, not deer, not human." The mist was getting thicker now, and sometimes I could swear I saw shapes. In it, tall, person-like forms that broke apart when I tried to look directly at them. After they vanished, a sweet smell hung in the air like flowers that had started to rot. We kept walking, hoping to find our way back when we stumbled upon a campsite. It looked like whoever had been there had just disappeared. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate. A cup of coffee was still steaming. An open book lay face down, like someone had just put it down to grab something. But there was nobody around, not a sound, not a trace of where they'd gone. "Michael, look at this," Evelyn said, holding up our map. "This doesn't make sense." She was right. The trails on the map seemed to be in different places than they were this morning. Lakes that should be miles apart now appeared side by side. It was as if the whole park had been shuffled around like a deck of cards. I pulled out my compass again, but it was useless. The needle kept spinning in circles. "We should keep moving," I said, trying to hide how worried I was getting. That's when we heard it, a child laughing. Clear as day, coming from the densest part of the fog. It sounded so real, so normal, that for a second I almost ran toward it. Then I remembered the nearest family camping area was at least 15 miles from here. No child should be this deep in the backcountry. "Don't," I said, grabbing Evelyn's arm as she instinctively stepped toward the sound. "Something's not right." That night we made camp, having given up on finding the ranger station before dark. Evelyn set out her sample containers, little glass jars where she kept the lichens and mosses she was studying. In the morning, they were all empty. Every single one. And there were strange marks scratched into the glass, like symbols or letters, from a language I'd never seen. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when I noticed my own footprints in the soft dirt around our campsite. The prints I'd made just hours before were changing shape. With each passing hour, they stretched. Longer and longer, less like a man's footprint and more like whatever had made those tracks by the lake. We found a camera that day too. It was sitting on a rock, like someone had carefully placed it there. It belonged to a family of hikers who had been reported missing 3 days earlier. I opened it up and took out the film, thinking it might give us some clue about what happened to them. That night, huddled around our campfire, it got so cold that our breath froze in the air in front of us. But instead of falling to the ground, the frozen breath hung there, forming crystals that stayed floating much longer than they should have. Evelyn suddenly went pale. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" "My mother. She's calling me." Her eyes were wide with fear. "But that's impossible. My mum died 3 years ago." I listened hard, but heard nothing except the strange silence of the forest. Whatever was out there in the mist, it was playing tricks on us now. And it was getting closer. The next morning I saw it for the first time. I was gathering firewood when I felt someone watching me. About 50 yards away, partially hidden by the mist, stood a figure. It was tall, much taller than any person should be, and it seemed to flow rather than stand, like its body was partly made of the same mist surrounding us. I reached for my service revolver. Rangers carry them for protection against wild animals, and fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the trees, but when I looked back, the figure was gone. No, not gone. It had dissolved into the fog, like it was made of the same stuff. Then, a heartbeat later, I spotted it again. Closer now, much closer. Close enough that I could see it wasn't wearing clothes or skin like a person. Its body was see-through like cloudy glass, and inside I could see shapes moving that looked like organs, but not like any organs I'd ever seen. They glowed with a faint blue-green light, pulsing in a rhythm that wasn't quite like a heartbeat. "Michael!" Evelyn's voice called from our campsite. "Michael, help! Something's here!" I ran back toward her voice, but when I got there, she was standing calmly by the fire. "What's wrong?" I asked, out of breath. She looked confused. "Nothing. I didn't call you." A chill ran down my spine as I realized what was happening. The thing in the mist could copy voices. A moment later, I heard my own voice calling from the forest. "Evelyn, run this way, quick!" Her eyes widened. "That sounded exactly like you." "Don't listen to it," I said, grabbing her arm. "Whatever you... Here, stay with me." We decided to follow a stream, hoping it would lead us to a landmark we recognized. As we walked, I noticed something strange. Wherever the mist creature passed, plants died. Trees that had been green and healthy turned gray and dried up like all the water had been sucked out of them. But I also noticed something useful. The creature wouldn't cross the stream. It stayed on one side, pacing back and forth like a tiger in a cage, watching us walk away on the other side. "It can't cross running water," I told Evelyn. "We'll be safe as long as we stay near the stream." That worked for a while until the stream ended at a large clearing. As we crossed the open space, the fog rolled in, thick and heavy. Suddenly, I saw multiple copies of Evelyn walking in different directions. "Stay where you are," I shouted, but I couldn't tell which Evelyn was real and which ones were copies made by the mist. "Michael!" Her voice came from 3 different directions at once. "Don't move," I said, trying to figure out which one was really her. "The real Evelyn. Tell me something only you would know. You have a scar on your hand from when you tried to save a raccoon from a trap last month, one of the Evelyns said. I moved toward that voice, but another fog shape that looked just like me stepped between us. Don't trust it, the fake me said, using my exact voice. I'm the real Michael. I could see Evelyn's face, the real Evelyn, filled with confusion. She didn't know which of us to believe. Run to the rocks, both of us shouted at the same time. She hesitated, then turned and ran in a third direction entirely, toward a cave entrance in the side of the mountain. I felt my stomach drop as I remembered the old maps of this area. The native people had marked that cave with a warning. They called it the Devouring Place. The creature was herding us exactly where it wanted us to go. Evelyn! I shouted, running after her. Stop! Don't go in there! But my voice was swallowed by the thickest fog I'd ever seen. It was like running through white soup. I couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. Every time I thought I was getting closer to Evelyn, her voice would come from somewhere else. Michael, she called. Where are you? I can't see anything. Keep talking, I yelled back. I'll follow your voice. But there were too many voices. Now, echoes bouncing off the mountainside, the creature mimicking both of us, and our real voices getting lost in the mix. I stumbled through the fog, my hand outstretched, when my foot hit something soft. I looked down and froze. It was a backpack. Next to it lay the camera we'd found, and beyond that, I nearly threw up when I saw them. Bodies, the missing hikers, but they didn't look like normal dead people. They were dried out, like all the water had been sucked from them, their skin pulled tight across their bones. Their faces were frozen in looks of pure terror. Evelyn! I screamed, no longer caring if the creature heard me. We have to get out of here now! Her real scream cut through the fog, not a call for help, but a sound of pure fear. I ran toward it, tripping over roots and rocks. When I finally found her, my blood turned to ice. She was backed into a corner of a small ravine. The mist creature towered over her, its see-through body now more solid than before. It had her pinned against the rock wall, and part of its body was melting into her, like it was trying to absorb her. Her screams became muffled as the mist covered her mouth. I had nothing but my gun, which I knew wouldn't help. Then I remembered Evelyn's equipment. She carried a special UV lamp to study her lichen samples in the field. I dumped out her backpack, frantically searching until my fingers closed around the lamp. I switched it on and pointed it at the creature. The effect was immediate. Where the purple light touched its body, the creature solidified and seemed to shrink back in pain. Its body made a high-pitched whining sound, like steam escaping a kettle. I waved the light back and forth, driving it away from Evelyn. She slumped to the ground, pale and shaking, but alive. Fire, I said, helping her up. It doesn't like the light. We need more. I pulled out my emergency flares and lit one. The bright red light pushed the fog back even further. The creature retreated, but I could tell it wasn't giving up. It was regrouping. Michael, Evelyn's voice was weak. It was inside me. I could feel it trying to take me. That's when I noticed parts of her skin had a strange see-through quality, like you could almost see through to the bones in her hand, and her eyes, they had a faint glow to them that wasn't there before. We're getting out of here, I said firmly, trying not to show my fear. Can you walk? She nodded, but her movements were strange, too fluid, like her joints weren't working quite right. I led her toward a narrow canyon I'd spotted earlier. It was a gamble, but I had a plan. When we reached it, I set Evelyn down behind a large boulder and quickly rigged up my remaining flares along both sides of the canyon walls. When it comes, I told her, I'll light all these at once. The heat and light should drive it back long enough for us to get past. We didn't have to wait long. The mist began pouring into the canyon, taking shape as it came. Taller now, more confident, moving with purpose. Now, I yelled, lighting the fuse that connected all the flares. They ignited with a whoosh, filling the narrow space with blinding red light and intense heat. The creature let out a sound I'll never forget. Not one voice, but dozens, screaming together in pain and rage. Through the glare, I could see it thrashing, its body breaking apart and reforming. I grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her past the burning flares, running as fast as we could toward the forest edge where I knew the ranger station would be. When we finally broke through the tree line, I could see the station just 100 yards away. We'd made it. But something was wrong. Evelyn's hand in mine felt different, colder. I looked back at her and noticed her movements were completely fluid, now unnaturally smooth. And when she smiled at me, it didn't reach her eyes. At the station door, I caught our reflection in the window glass. I saw myself dirty and exhausted, but where Evelyn should have been, the reflection showed something else entirely. Something tall and flowing, with glowing organs visible through its transparent skin. I'd never made it to Evelyn in time. The thing that followed me out of the forest wasn't her at all. It was the mist stalker wearing her face. My name is Marcus Delgado. I've been a ranger at Redwood National Park for almost 20 years now. Just turned 47 last month. The giant trees have been my home longer than anywhere else I've lived. I know every trail, every creek, and most of the animals that live here. At least, I thought I did. It was a cold autumn morning when everything changed. I woke up while it was still dark, like I always do. My small cabin was chilly, and I could see my breath making little clouds in the air as I got out of bed. The first thing I did was start the coffee pot. The familiar bubbling sound was comforting as I spread out the reports on my kitchen table. That's weird, I mumbled to myself, looking at the papers. We'd been having strange shaking in the ground near the northeastern part of the park. Not big earthquakes, but something was definitely off. The old redwoods don't like being disturbed. Those trees have stood for thousands of years. Some were growing when knights were still fighting dragons in storybooks. I traced my finger over the map where all the shaking had been happening. It was right along the edge of the park, where those greedy logging companies have been trying to cut down trees. They're not supposed to touch the old ones, the ancient giants that have been alive for centuries, but I've caught them sneaking over the line before. The coffee was ready, and I poured myself a big cup, adding just a splash of milk. Nothing beats that first sip in the morning. I folded up the map and put it in my backpack, along with my water bottle, some trail mix, and my ranger gear. I needed to check out what was happening with those tremors myself. As I hiked into the forest, the morning light was just starting to filter through the massive trees. Normally this is my favorite time of day. The mist hangs between the huge trunks, making everything look magical. But today, something felt wrong. It took me a minute to figure out what was bothering me. Then it hit me. The forest was completely silent. No birds singing their morning songs, no squirrels chattering and jumping from branch to branch, not even the buzz of insects. Just nothing. Like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. I've been a ranger long enough to know that when the animals go quiet, there's usually a good reason. Maybe a predator nearby or some kind of danger. I kept walking, but my hand stayed close to my bear spray, just in case. After hiking for about an hour, I found it. One of the oldest redwoods in this section, at least 300 years old, was lying on the ground. This wasn't right. These trees don't just fall over for no reason. Their roots go deep, anchoring them against storms and floods. This tree looked like it had been yanked out of the ground by some giant hand. The roots were exposed, dirt still clinging to them. All around it, smaller trees were broken and bent, like something massive had moved through here. I kneeled down to look at the ground, and that's when I saw them. Footprints, but not from any animal I'd ever seen in these woods. They were huge, about 22 inches long, and shaped like a human foot, but much, much bigger. I could see 5 toes clearly pressed into the mud. Whatever made these prints must have weighed hundreds of pounds. And there was something else. Caught in some broken branches, I found several long, coarse hairs. They weren't bear fur or deer hair. They were different, thicker, and with a reddish-brown color I'd never seen before. I took out a small evidence bag and carefully collected the hairs. My heart was beating faster now. In all my years as a ranger, I'd heard the stories from locals and some of the older park workers. Stories about something living deep in the redwoods, something that didn't want to be found. Most rangers laughed at those tales, but standing there looking at those massive footprints, I wasn't laughing anymore. I needed to call this in to headquarters right away. Whatever happened here wasn't natural, and it wasn't safe. I pulled out my satellite phone and started to dial, not knowing that my entire life was about to change forever. I pressed the buttons on my satellite phone, trying to reach headquarters. The call connected and I started explaining what I'd found to my boss, Ranger Thompson. I'm telling you, something pulled this tree right out of the ground. And these footprints, that's when the call cut off. Just static, then nothing. I checked. The signal, full bars. Weird. I tried again, but the phone wouldn't connect. Then I noticed something else strange. The air around me had gotten much colder, like when you open a freezer door and feel that rush of cold air hit your face. I put the phone back in my pocket and decided to follow the path of broken trees. Whatever made those huge footprints had left a trail of destruction. Small trees snapped like twigs, bushes flattened, and more of those massive footprints everywhere. After walking for about half an hour, I came to a clearing that wasn't on any of my maps, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. There was logging equipment scattered everywhere, a bulldozer, chainsaws, and other tools. But they weren't just abandoned, they were destroyed. The bulldozer was crushed like someone had stepped on a soda can. The metal was twisted and torn, with deep scratches that looked like claw marks. These weren't just any scratches, they had cut through solid steel like it was paper. "Hello, is anyone here?" I called out, but the strange silence of the forest swallowed my words. That's when I noticed the blood. Dark red splashes on the yellow metal of the bulldozer, more blood on the ground, making a trail leading into the thick bushes. Something very bad had happened here. Following my ranger training, I examined the blood patterns. From the way it was splattered, at least 2 people had been hurt here, badly hurt. But there were no bodies, just drag marks heading deeper into the forest, like something had carried them away. My stomach turned when I found a human arm on the ground. It was torn off at the shoulder, still clutching something. I forced myself to look closer. It was holding a gun, but not a regular one. This was a tranquilizer gun, the kind used to put large animals to sleep. Loggers don't carry these. This was the kind of equipment big game hunters use. What were they really doing out here? This was starting to feel less like a logging operation and more like they were hunting something big. The sky seemed to get darker, even though it wasn't even noon yet. A thick fog rolled in around me, but it wasn't like normal fog. It smelled strange, a strong, musky odor that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was like my body was trying to tell me to run before my brain even knew why. I pulled out my compass to check which direction would take me back to the ranger station. The needle was spinning wildly, pointing in all directions. I'd never seen anything like it. While I was trying to figure out what to do next, I spotted something carved into one of the tree trunks. Strange symbols, circles and lines that didn't look like anything I recognized. I'd seen similar markings in some of the restricted areas of the park, places where archaeologists had found evidence of ancient people living here thousands of years ago. I took out my camera and snapped some pictures of the symbols. Maybe someone back at headquarters would know what they meant. Just then, my radio crackled to life, making me jump. Through the static, I heard a voice. "Detected unusual biosignatures. Subject is larger than anticipated." requesting permission to use lethal force if... Then nothing but static again. I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't any of the park rangers, and we certainly don't talk about lethal force or biosignatures. It sounded more like scientists, military. I checked the radio's channel. It was set to our secure park frequency. Nobody outside the ranger service should be able to broadcast on it. I tried to respond, but got nothing but static. Something very strange was happening in my forest. First, the weird footprints and destroyed equipment, then the symbols, and now mysterious voices on the radio. I needed to find out what was going on, even if it meant going deeper into the silent woods. Little did I know, the forest was watching my every move, and I wasn't the hunter here. I was being hunted. I pushed deeper into the forest, following the trail of broken branches and strange footprints. The fog was getting thicker, making it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. Every sound made me jump. The crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves. But the weirdest thing was how few sounds there actually were. This part of the forest should be alive with noise. After about an hour of careful walking, I spotted something through the trees. Flashes of bright color that didn't belong in the forest. As I got closer, I realized it was a camp, but not a camping spot that any hiker would set up. This looked more like a research station. There were 4 tents, all torn to shreds. Equipment was scattered everywhere, like the people had left in a big hurry or been dragged away. I found expensive-looking computers smashed on the ground, cameras broken into pieces, and scientific instruments I didn't even recognize. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out, but got no answer except my own voice echoing back. I spotted a leather-bound journal half buried in the dirt. Picking it up, I brushed off the mud and opened it. The handwriting was neat at first, then got messier and more frantic in the later pages. Day 3. We've detected unusual brainwave patterns emanating from the oldest trees in the sector. Dr. Wilson believes the redwoods might be creating some kind of telepathic field. Sounds crazy, but our equipment doesn't lie. I flipped through more pages, my hands starting to shake as I read. Day 7. 3 team members reported the same dream last night, being watched by something in the forest. Coincidence? Day 12. The equipment keeps picking up movement around the camp, but we can't see anything. The motion sensors go off, but the cameras show nothing. The final entry made my mouth go dry. It knows we're hunting it. Whatever lives in these woods, it's not just running on animal instinct. It's smarter than we thought. It can see through any eyes in the forest, birds, insects, even the trees themselves somehow. God help us. It's watching us right now. The page ended with a dark smear that looked horribly like blood. I put the journal in my backpack, trying to make sense of what I'd read. A scientific research team in the park? I hadn't heard anything about this. No permits had been issued as far as I knew. As I looked around the destroyed camp, something strange caught my eye. My reflection in a puddle didn't look right. For just a second, I thought I saw something huge standing behind me in the reflection. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The same thing happened when I glanced at my watch. In the shiny face of the watch, I saw the outline of a massive, hairy figure towering over me. But when I looked up, I was alone. I needed to get out of here. I pulled out my map and compass, but something was wrong. According to the compass, I'd been walking in circles, even though I was sure I'd been moving in a straight line. The trails seemed to be changing, leading me back to the same spots over and over. My head started pounding with the worst headache I'd ever felt. Strange images flashed through my mind, pictures of men with axes cutting down ancient trees, hunters with guns tracking something through the forest, scientists setting traps. These weren't my memories. It felt like someone was forcing them into my head. I stumbled forward, just wanting to find my way out, when I heard the sound of running water. Following it, I came to a small waterfall I'd never seen before. And I thought I knew every inch of this park. Behind the falling water, half hidden by the splash and mist, was the dark opening of a cave. The rocks around the entrance were carved with the same strange symbols I'd seen on the trees. Something pulled me toward that cave. Not a physical force, but a feeling, like I needed to go inside, like something was calling me. The sun was getting low, and common sense told me not to enter a strange cave so late in the day. But I felt like if I didn't go in, I'd never find the answers to what was happening in my forest. I clicked on my flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped through the waterfall into the darkness beyond. The air inside was surprisingly warm, unlike any cave I'd been in before, and as my light swept across the walls, I gasped at what it revealed. The cave walls were covered with paintings, ancient ones showing human-like figures standing next to much larger beings. The large figures were painted in red ochre, with long arms and huge feet. Some of the paintings must have been thousands of years old. I moved deeper into the cave, my flashlight beam dancing across the walls. The farther I went, the stronger. A feeling grew inside me, the feeling that I wasn't alone, and that whatever was with me in this cave had been waiting a very, very long time for someone like me to arrive. My flashlight beam swept across the cave floor, revealing something. That made me stop in my tracks. Scattered everywhere were objects that didn't belong together. An old rusty helmet that looked like it was from Spanish explorers hundreds of years ago, gold mining tools from the 1800s, and modern cameras exactly like the ones at the destroyed research camp. All of them were bent, crushed, or torn apart. As I moved deeper into the cave, my foot kicked something that rolled away with a hollow sound. I pointed my flashlight down and nearly dropped it when I saw what it was, a human skull. It wasn't alone. The beam of light showed me a whole wall of skulls, arranged in neat rows. Some looked ancient and brown with age, but others still had bits of flesh clinging to them. Their eye sockets seemed to stare at me, filled with the same fear they must have felt in their final moments. The air felt heavy, and a strange humming sound vibrated through the cave. I watched in disbelief as small pebbles on the ground started to shake and then rise up, floating inches above the floor like there was no gravity. I noticed the ground beneath my feet was covered with thousands of footprints, the same huge, human-like prints I'd found outside, but here they were layered on top of each other, some looking fresh, while others had hardened into the clay floor of the cave, like they'd been made hundreds of years ago. That's when I felt it. A change. In the air, like when a storm is coming. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I had the overwhelming feeling that I wasn't alone. I slowly turned around, and my flashlight revealed something moving in the shadows, something massive. It stepped forward into the circle of light, and I had to clamp my hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. Standing before me was a creature that shouldn't exist. It stood at least 9 feet tall, its body covered in thick reddish-brown fur with streaks of silver. It wasn't a bear standing on its hind legs. This thing was shaped like a human, but much, much bigger. Its muscles looked powerful enough to tear a tree from the ground. Its face was almost human-like, with deep-set eyes that glowed with an intelligence that shocked me. This wasn't just an animal. Whatever this creature was, it was thinking, watching, judging me. I stood frozen, unable to run, unable even to speak. The creature made no move to attack me. Instead, it did something even more terrifying. It reached out with its massive hand and touched my forehead. Instantly, my mind was flooded with images that weren't mine. I saw ships arriving on shores with pale men carrying weapons. I saw forests being cut down, animals being hunted to extinction. I saw the creatures, not just this one, but many of them, retreating deeper and deeper into the shrinking wilderness as humans took more and more land. These weren't just random pictures. The creature was showing me its memories, its history. It was talking to me without words. More images came, Researchers setting traps, hunters with guns searching the woods, loggers cutting down the ancient trees that these beings somehow had a connection with. I felt its anger, its fear, its determination to protect what little territory it had left. Then the connection broke as 3 more creatures emerged from the shadows of the cave. They were slightly smaller than the first one, perhaps younger, and they were carrying something, the bodies of men. I recognized the torn clothing of loggers. Their limbs hung at impossible angles, and their heads were crushed beyond recognition. I felt sick as I watched the younger creatures place the bodies on stone tables and begin to pull them apart with their powerful hands. They weren't just destroying the bodies. They were carefully removing specific organs and placing them in containers made from hollowed-out pieces of redwood. The eldest creature, I couldn't help thinking of it as the Alpha, touched my head again. This time, I understood. More clearly, these beings weren't just hiding in the forest, they had power over it. The tremors I'd been investigating weren't natural earthquakes. They were created by these creatures to scare away humans who got too close to their territory. They could change the weather, creating fog and storms to hide their movements. More incredible still, they had some kind of connection to the ancient redwoods. They could see through the eyes of the forest itself. The birds, the insects, even the trees somehow helped them know when intruders were coming. Suddenly, a sharp electronic sound cut through the strange communion. My satellite phone was ringing in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands and saw missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Then, a text message appeared. Security team en route. To your location. ETA 30 minutes. Stand by. It was from the logging company. They were coming here, probably armed and ready for trouble after losing contact with their crew. The creatures sensed the change immediately. The fur on their massive bodies stood on end, and they made a sound so low and powerful that I felt it more than heard it. Blood began trickling from my nose as the infrasound vibrated through my body. The Alpha creature's eyes locked with mine, and I understood the choice it was giving me without words being spoken. I could leave with a warning, or I could stay and join the wall of skulls. The ground beneath us trembled, and I knew these beings were getting ready for a fight. Somehow, they were communicating with the ancient trees themselves, using them as a kind of network to track the approaching humans. I had to make a decision that would change everything. "I'll help you," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll warn them away. This is your home. I understand that now." The Alpha Sasquatch stared at me for what felt like forever, its deep eyes searching mine for any lie. The ground trembled harder, and small rocks fell from the cave ceiling. The younger creatures made huffing sounds, clearly wanting to attack the approaching humans, not trust one of them. The Alpha raised one massive hand, and the others went quiet. A series of images flowed into my mind, the security team getting closer, their guns, their radios. Then an image of me standing at the edge of the forest, warning them away. The creature was showing me what it wanted me to do. I nodded. "I'll tell them the area is dangerous, unstable ground. I'll make sure they don't come back." The trembling of the earth eased slightly. The Alpha creature made a gesture toward one of the younger ones, who seemed unhappy, but obeyed. It moved to what looked like another tunnel leading out of the cave. The Alpha touched my forehead one more time. The message was clear. If I betrayed them, they would know, and they would find me. I followed the younger Sasquatch through a narrow tunnel that sloped gently upward. As we walked, I noticed small crystals embedded in the cave walls that gave off a faint blue glow, just enough to see by. This place was older and deeper than I could have imagined. The tunnel widened, and suddenly we weren't alone. In the shadows of a large cavern, hundreds of glowing eyes watched me. An entire clan of these creatures, smaller ones that might have been children, others as large as the Alpha. They stood perfectly still, watching the human in their midst. I felt like I was being allowed to see something no other living person had seen. After passing through the cavern, we came to another tunnel that led upward. Fresh air hit my face, and soon we emerged into the forest again, but far from where I'd entered the cave. It was almost sunset now, the light turning golden through the massive redwoods. I looked at my watch to check how much time had passed, but the hands were spinning wildly, stopping at exactly 3:33 p.m. From then on, no matter what I did, it never worked again. The young Sasquatch pointed toward a trail I recognized. It would lead me to the park boundary. The creature's message was clear. Go that way. Don't look back. As I started walking, I couldn't help myself. I turned around once to look at the creature. It was already melting back into the forest, its reddish fur blending perfectly with the redwood trunks in the sunset light. I walked as fast as I could, trying to reach the boundary before the security team got too far into the forest. My mind was racing. What would I tell them? Who would believe what I'd seen? My thoughts were interrupted by the rumble of engines. Through the trees, I saw headlights, several trucks moving along the boundary road. The logging company's security team. I broke into a run, waving my arms. "Hey, over here!" A truck screeched to a halt, and men with flashlights jumped out. They wore uniforms with the logging company logo and carried sidearms. "Ranger Delgado, what the hell are you doing out here at this hour?" The leader shined his light in my face. I tried to speak, but my words came out jumbled and confused. Earthquake, danger zone, no entry. They looked at me strangely, and one muttered to another, "What's wrong with him? Is he drunk?" The leader grabbed my arm. "Where's our crew? We lost contact with them hours ago." I shook my head. "No one. There's no one there. Landslide, equipment destroyed. Too dangerous to go in." "You're not making sense, Ranger. We're going in to find our people." I grabbed his arm. "No, you can't go in there. The ground is unstable. More slides could happen any minute." I was surprised by the force in my voice. "I'm ordering this area closed. Park Authority." He stared at me for a long moment, then at the darkening forest behind me. Something in my face must have convinced him, because he finally nodded. "We'll come back in the morning." With more men, I knew that by morning there would be no evidence of what really happened. Somehow, I just knew. They loaded me into one of their trucks and drove me back to the ranger station. The whole way, I kept seeing movement in the trees alongside the road. Massive shapes following us, making sure we were leaving their territory. As we drove away, I felt the weight of the choice I'd made. I had sided with creatures that had killed humans, but I also understood why they had done it. They were protecting their home, their family, their very existence. Just like I was sworn to protect the park. I didn't know it then, but my life had changed forever. I had formed a connection with something ancient and powerful, and that connection would never be broken. The next morning, I sat in the park office, staring at the blank report form on my computer. How could I explain what really happened? No one would believe me. They'd think I was crazy, or worse, involved in whatever happened to those loggers. So I lied. I wrote about geological instability in the northeastern sector. I claimed there were toxic fungal spores in the air that could cause hallucinations. I recommended the area be closed temporarily while we investigated further. Park Director Davis read my report with narrowed eyes. "This is pretty thin, Marcus. The logging company is demanding answers about their missing men." "Trust me," I said, meeting his gaze. "That area isn't safe right now. We need to keep people out." He didn't look convinced, but he signed off on a temporary closure. "1 month," he said, "then we need to reopen it." I nodded, knowing that wouldn't be enough, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, I tried to go back to my normal routine, but nothing was normal anymore. The hair samples I'd collected had been sent to the lab for testing. When the results came back, they'd been switched. The report said they were just common bear fur. I know I didn't make a mistake. Someone had changed them. Then there was what happened to my garden. I've always grown vegetables behind my cabin, but now the plants were growing at an impossible rate. tomatoes the size of softballs, zucchinis that grew 6 inches overnight. I noticed it happened especially after I'd had nightmares about the cave and woke up with a nosebleed. My blood in the soil seemed to make things grow wild. But the strangest thing was the feeling I got whenever someone was planning to enter the restricted zone. My head would start pounding with the worst headache imaginable. It wouldn't stop until the threat passed. Somehow, I always knew when someone was getting too close to their territory. About a month after my encounter, the logging company decided to ignore the closure notice. They sent equipment in during the night, thinking no one would notice. The next morning, their machines were found abandoned. The workers refused to say what happened, but I saw the fear in their eyes, and I saw the huge footprints circling each vehicle pressed deep into the mud. My boss called me into his office that day. "This is getting weird, Marcus. First the missing men, now this. The company's CEO is raising hell." I just nodded. "The area isn't safe." I told them that. What I didn't tell him was that the CEO and other executives had started having problems of their own. Whenever they pushed to log near the restricted zone, they came down with mysterious illnesses. They had violent nightmares of being hunted through dark forests. One by one, they backed off. Every morning, I would find strange arrangements of stones on my porch. They formed the same symbols I had seen in the cave. I learned that they would appear before earthquakes or big storms. They were warnings, preparing me for what was coming. 6 months after my encounter, I found a manila folder on my desk marked classified. Inside was a copy of my personnel file with new notes. Subject exhibits unusual pattern recognition and intuitive threat assessment. Recommend monitoring for further development of abilities. Some federal agency had taken an interest in me, but they kept their distance, watching from afar. I think they were afraid of what I might be connected to. On the 1-year anniversary of my encounter, I woke to find a perfect circle of mushrooms surrounding my cabin. They weren't normal mushrooms. When I touched one, my fingertips tingled and my vision blurred with images of the forest from high above, as if I was seeing through the eyes of a bird. That night, I found the last page of my journal filled with coordinates written in my own handwriting. I had no memory of writing them down. Looking at them on a map, I realized they marked the location of something important, the place where new Sasquatch babies were born. The birthing grounds. The knowledge settled in me like a heavy stone. I was being trusted with their most important secret, and I knew I would protect it with my life if needed. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is full, I sit on my porch and listen to the forest. Normal people hear wind in the trees, maybe an owl hooting, but I hear more now. A deep, rhythmic humming that vibrates through the ground. The sound of ancient beings moving through their territory, watching, protecting. They've accepted me as some kind of go-between, a bridge between their world and mine. I keep humans away from their territory, and they allow the rest of the park to remain open and safe. But the connection goes deeper than that. With each passing season, I notice changes in myself. My hearing is sharper. I can see better in the dark. Plants grow wild at my touch. And sometimes, when I'm deep in the forest alone, I can feel the trees talking to each other through their roots, a vast network of silent communication that's been happening for thousands of years. I've never gone back to the cave. I don't need to. They know where to find me if they need me, and I know better than to enter their inner sanctum uninvited. The world thinks Sasquatch is just a legend, a myth, and that's exactly how they want it. Their survival depends on staying hidden, staying safe from a world that would capture them, study them, destroy them. So I keep their secret, I protect their home, and in return they've shown me that there's more to this world than most humans will ever know. Ancient powers that flow through the oldest living things on Earth, connections that science can't explain. My name is Marcus Delgado. I'm a park ranger, and I guard the border between two worlds.